Fang Hao headed straight for the Merchant Alliance Stone Tower. There he met Du Jin, his loyal skeleton merchant. Fang Hao was curious, how would they deliver such a massive haul without an address? Du Jin explained the magic of the alliance. The order itself acted as a beacon. By using an ability called Descent, the merchant could teleport directly to the buyer's location. At the warehouse, Fang Hao began the crafting process. As the materials merged, his unique hundredfold amplification ability surged, multiplying the output until a mountain of steel and leather filled the room. 1,000 sets of gear, 3,000 heavy adzes, all ready in an instant. With a flicker of light, the skeleton merchant vanished, transporting the cargo across the world. Moments later, Su Yang messaged again, his words practically shaking with awe. He had never seen a skeleton merchant before, nor such high-quality goods. Fang Hao, feeling generous after his massive payday, offered Su Yang a reward for acting as the middleman. Su Yang hesitated. He confessed that his territory had no soldiers. He was merely a slave driver leading farmers to mine for the ogres. He was surviving on the edge. Fang Hao didn't offer empty pity. Instead, he sent practical aid, 1,000 handsaws and 1,000 iron pickaxes. In this harsh world, tools were just as vital as swords, and Fang Hao had plenty to spare. The skeleton merchant returned from the troll territory, his bony feet surrounded by heavy wooden crates overflowing with war coins. "My lord," the merchant rasped, "the total transaction is 510,000 war coins. After the 2% tax, 499,800 remain." Fang Hao marveled at the Merchant Alliance, a system more efficient than robbery, functioning like a high-speed e-commerce platform from his old world. He directed his maid, Year, to oversee the storage, then turned his focus to his newly purchased blueprints. He began with the Iron Claw rat nest, spending 100 units of wood and 1,100 units of straw. A green light flared, revealing a burr-like structure. While he lacked the necessary Lingwu crystals to recruit the rats, he noted their ability to tear through solid rock. Next, he focused on the forge, mass-producing black iron kite shields, high-speed hardwood shortbows, and apprentice mage robes. The air filled with the scent of hot iron as equipment piled high. He summoned Blood Hunter to organize the gear swap, sending the old, repaired items back to the markets to ensure his gold kept flowing. The following morning, a communication conch vibrated on his nightstand. The greasy, syrupy voice of an orc slave trader echoed through the shell, whispering of new goods available at Manhwa Market. Fang Hao gathered in Jia, and together they soared across the sky atop a massive bone dragon. To avoid alarming the orc tribes, they landed at a subsidiary city and finished the journey on horseback. At the market, a startled Minotaur guard greeted them before Fang Hao sought out the trader. The orc, draped in gaudy jewels, led them into a foul-smelling warehouse. "You've come just in time, human friend," the trader chuckled, pulling back a tattered, oily cloth. Fang Hao froze. Inside the iron cage was not a rabbit person, but someone entirely new. A girl with pointed, canine-like ears and a large, fluffy brown tail huddled in the corner, sobbing quietly, her eyes wide with terror locked onto his. "Fox people," the trader explained with a predatory grin. "Their village was wiped out by an orc army, and I thought you might find them interesting." Fang Hao stood before the iron cages of Manhwa Market, listening to the slave trader's oily flattery with a skeptical eye. He was not fooled. Unlike the docile rabbit people he had purchased previously, these 5 fox women were trembling, their eyes brimming with fresh, raw terror. "Shut up," the orc trader roared, slamming a heavy iron rod against the bars with a deafening asterisk clang asterisk. "One more tear and you are dog food." The fox women froze, stifling their sobs as they stared at the ground, despite his initial hesitation. Fang Hao struck a deal, 10 war coins per person. With the slave contracts signed, he led the weeping captives toward the clan hall, promising them a full meal if they would only follow. Inside the hall, the Minotaur leader, Copperbull Taelyuok, set aside his massive battle axe to greet his lord. While news of the Skullcrusher tribe remained elusive, Fang Hao offered a game-changing gift, the establishment of a merit trial ground to help the Minotaurs advance to hero status. The news sparked a fire in the warrior's bovine eyes, and in that moment Copperbull's loyalty surged by 20 points, reaching a remarkable 85. Before leaving the market, Fang Hao stopped at the local tavern to secure a rare map of a cave camp, a potential new frontier for his expansion. With the fierce orc hero and Jia at his side and a Minotaur escort behind, the group began the trek back to the main territory. However, the homecoming was far from peaceful for the new arrivals. As the territory's massive, silent undead army came into view, the fox women collapsed, 2 fainting from sheer shock while the others huddled together, wailing in despair. Fang Hao did not offer empty comforts. He simply handed the terrified group over to Year, his head maid, to be fed and taught the rules of the land. Finally, Fang Hao turned his attention to the physical growth of his city. Standing in the warehouse area, he activated his crafting skills to create stone slabs for paving. With a flicker of light and the power of the hundredfold amplification, he transformed a pile of stone into 10,100 slabs, ready to turn his dusty paths into a true imperial capital. After a quiet lunch, Yi led the newly joined slaves through the territory, familiarizing them with their new home. Fang Hao was weighing his plans for the afternoon when his lord's book chimed. It was Dong Jiayu. She had finished exploring an ancient tomb and offered a trade 49 shadow stones. Fang Hao accepted immediately, but his heart sank when she mentioned the copper coffin she found. She had burned the powerful corpse inside to ashes, thinking she was protecting him. Fang Hao sighed. Even the bones would have been precious for his undead buildings. Still, he thanked her, asking her to preserve any future remains. Before hanging up, Jiayu offered a final gift, a map to the barren battlefield. Fang Hao studied the description with a grimace. It was a burial ground for 500,000 civilians and hundreds of thousands of soldiers, a land stained crimson. While the danger was immense, the potential for shadow stones was even greater. He decided on a steady approach. He would not rush, but he would not ignore it. Fang Hao messaged Zhang Bin, his governor to the west, ordering him to begin scouting the route toward the battlefield. Zhang Bin agreed, though he requested horses to improve the efficiency of their grain transport. Fang Hao promised the mounts and instructed Zhang Bin to keep an eye out for silkworms in the nearby villages. Turning to a rabbit girl maid, Fang Hao commanded, "Call Blood Hunter here." Moments later, the air swirled as Blood Hunter landed, his massive bat wings kicking up dust. Fang Hao ordered him to deliver 10 horses to Zhang Bin's city. The process was chaotic. The horses were lashed securely to the back of a bone dragon. Fang Hao watched with wide eyes as the skeletal beast took to the sky, the terrified neighing of the horses echoing through the clouds. He prayed they would survive the flight. As the dragon vanished into the distance, Du Jin, the skeleton merchant, approached with a clatter of bone. He presented a new opportunity, a high-level order. Someone required 100 exquisite corpse coffins, the reward 10,000 war coins, and an increase of 10 points to his blood tribe influence. Fang Hao looked at the request, the wheels of industry already turning in his mind. The difference between the immortal undead and the vampires was simple luxury. While the undead sought only utility, the vampires craved the comforts of their former mortal lives. Fang Hao looked over the blueprint for an exquisite corpse coffin, a masterpiece of hardwood, leather, and high-quality cloth. With Du Jin following close behind, he headed toward the Merchant Alliance to fulfill a new, prestigious order. At the warehouse, Fang Hao initiated the craft. A surge of magical energy, the hundredfold amplification, triggered instantly. Where there should have been one coffin, 101 black-lacquered vessels now sat in the shadows. A skeleton merchant departed with the cargo, returning shortly after with 9,800 war coins and news of the vampires' immense satisfaction. However, the day's success was interrupted by a frantic message from Zhang Bin. It seemed that using bone dragons for transport had its downsides. The horses were currently kneeling on the ground, terrified and physically ill. Fang Hao sighed, instructing Zhang Bin to let the animals rest for a day. He had learned his lesson. Some creatures simply weren't meant for the skies. Meanwhile, deep within the Coldwind Mountains, a different kind of silence reigned. Skullcrusher Saul sat upon his throne, his breathing heavy and ragged like a pulling bellows. Below him, his commanders trembled. The news was impossible. An army of 300,000 orcs had vanished. The scouts found only blood-stained earth. No bodies, no tents, only a sea of crimson. Saul's fury boiled over, his fist shattering a stone table as he cursed the name of the undead. He summoned the robed orc priest to the hero altar, demanding the resurrection of the fallen commander Amiri, but the ritual failed. Like those before him, Amiri's soul was imprisoned. The priest managed only a brief soul awakening. Amiri's ghostly image flickered into view, his voice filled with agony. He spoke of nightmares of bone dragons and skeleton ogres that the orcs could not hope to resist. As the spirit dissipated, a heavy dread settled over the tribe. Saul, refusing to yield, ordered his scouts to gather every scrap of intelligence they could find. Back at the territory, unaware of the growing storm, Fang Hao stood before the Lord's stone tower. With a final command, he initiated the upgrade. Light enveloped the structure, expanding the stone and heightening the walls. When the glow faded, a level 6 fortress stood in its place. A true castle, rising defiant against the horizon. The expansion of the stone tower was only the beginning. As the structure reached level 6, Fang Hao felt the surge of a 1% attribute boost across his entire domain. Not stopping there, he pushed the warehouse, the city walls, and the arrow towers to level 6 as well, fortifying his sanctuary before settling in for a quiet night of fruit wine under the moonlight. The next morning broke bright and clear. Yi was already hard at work managing the newly arrived foxkin. Among them, a white fox maid, her fur snowy and pristine, caught Fang Hao's eye. She scurried away in a panic the moment he spoke, her large tail swaying nervously. Fang Hao sighed, wondering if he truly appeared that terrifying to his own staff. The domestic peace was soon interrupted by Du Jin, who arrived with a lucrative new order from the Merchant Alliance. The request, 10 silver-thread silk alchemist robes. The reward was staggering, 10,000 war coins and a rare stamina inspiration potion. There was only one problem: they lacked the blueprint. For now, the order would have to wait. Transitioning from trade to infrastructure, Fang Hao met with a delegation of pig folk. He handed them detailed maps, tasking them with a massive project, overseeing the labor skeletons as they paved stone roads to connect his affiliated cities. With the skeletons providing the brawn and the pig folk providing the direction, the territory's veins began to stretch across the land. But the day's true mission lay to the south. Fang Hao gathered a massive force of 50,000 troops and cast divine descent, his consciousness sliding into the cold, rattling frame of a skeleton warrior. The army marched toward the mysterious cave camp, a grand procession of death moving through the wild forest. Suddenly, the rhythm of the march was broken, and Jia galloped forward, a bruised Tier 4 human warrior slung over her horse. The man pleaded for his life, claiming to be a simple cloth merchant, but Fang Hao saw through the lie immediately. No merchant had hands that calloused or eyes that calculating. Fang Hao accepted a bribe of 100 human gold coins and ordered the man released. And Jia watched in confusion as the spy vanished into the brush, but Fang Hao's plan was already in motion. His soul fire extinguished within the skeleton warrior and reignited instantly in the eyes of a giant bat, soaring silently into the canopy to shadow his unsuspecting prey. The giant bat watched from the shadows as Bok arrived at the mountain cave. Outside, the camp was a mess of human filth. Bok kicked an iron pot with a heavy *clank* and bellowed for his men to move. A group of 40 orcs and humans stumbled out, weapons drawn. The lead orc, swinging a heavy mace, roared in frustration. He wanted the ransom money, but Bok's voice trembled with terror as he screamed about the army of tens of thousands of undead marching from the north. Panic set in. They grabbed their valuables and dragged a blindfolded, bound young girl out of the darkness, fleeing desperately toward the east. They didn't get far. The sound of rhythmic, heavy footsteps made the earth tremble. Ahead, a white-haired woman and a wall of undead cavalry blocked their path. From the center of the bone army, a skeleton with eyes of flickering blue fire spoke. He thanked Bok for leading them to the hideout. Bok's face turned white. Before he could scream his innocence, the lead orc, driven by rage and stupidity, smashed his mace into Bok's skull. Thud! Bok collapsed, dead before he hit the ground. The orc then grabbed the little girl, using her as a shield, sneering at the undead. Fang Hao, the skeleton commander, remained cold. He didn't know the girl's father, and he certainly didn't care for threats. He gave the order. A faint whistle filled the air as dozens of skeleton archers released their strings. The orc was riddled with arrows instantly, falling like a porcupine. Within minutes, the kidnappers were slaughtered. Fang Hao approached the girl. To his surprise, she was remarkably calm. She explained that her father, Tavik, was a wealthy cloth merchant in Pearl City and promised a handsome reward for her safety. Fang Hao agreed to help, keeping her blindfolded as they began the long journey back. By noon the next day, the sun shimmered over the gates of Pearl City. 2 strange guests arrived on horseback. A young man wore silver knight's armor over a mage's robe, carrying both a sword and a gemstone staff, while an orc woman rode behind him, holding the little girl. The townspeople whispered in shock. News of Tavik's kidnapped daughter had spread for days. As the trio reached the entrance, the patrol guards stepped forward, blocking the way. "You too," the guard commanded, "state your business." The city gates loomed ahead as Fang Hao, a Tier 5 human warrior, approached the patrolling guards. Their captain, a man of steady discipline, eyed the armored traveler and the young girl trailing behind him. "I rescued this child from bandits in the wild," Fang Hao explained, his voice calm and direct. The little girl nodded, her small voice confirming the tale. "This big brother and big sister saved me." The captain offered a respectful nod, advising the party to dismount as they entered the residential district. Fang Hao stepped down from his horse, carefully securing his starfire staff, before the sound of frantic, heavy footsteps echoed from the street ahead. A well-dressed man named Tavik rushed toward them, his face a mask of pure, agonizing relief. "Daughter, my daughter," he cried, pulling the girl into a fierce embrace. While Tavik wept with self-reproach, the girl remained remarkably composed. Tavik turned to Fang Hao and his guard and Jia, bowing low in gratitude. A servant stepped forward, presenting a brocade box brimming with 2,000 gold coins. Fang Hao accepted the payment without hesitation. It was a small matter, he remarked politely before pivoting the conversation toward business. I hear you are a successful cloth merchant. I would like to learn more about your trade. Tavik was stunned. He looked at Fang Hao, a man clad in iron armor and a mage's robe, and saw a wealthy young master playing at knightly adventures. Seeking to foster a powerful connection, Tavik invited them to his factory. As their carriage rattled toward the city's edge, Tavik explained the complexities of the industry, from the temperamental nature of silkworms to the high demands of the nobility. Inside the humming workshop, they watched workers weave delicate threads into masterpieces. To seal their friendship, Tavik presented Fang Hao with a bolt of holy snow silk, a fabric so white and smooth, it felt like cool water against the skin. Fang Hao tucked the silk away, then made a bold request. Mr. Tavik, I wish to purchase the blueprints for your weaving machines and a supply of breedable silkworms. Tavik hesitated, warning that the initial investment was steep and the risks were many, but seeing Fang Hao's resolve, he eventually agreed. Declining a formal dinner, Fang Hao and Njia made their way to the local tavern as evening approached. He wasn't there for the food, he was hunting for maps to guide his next expansion. Inside the dim, amber-lit room, a curvaceous landlady leaned over the bar, her eyes full of practiced charm. "What can I get you?" she asked softly. "2 beers," Fang Hao replied, while Njia settled onto a stool beside him. The landlady slid the frothing mugs across the wood, her voice dropping to a curious whisper. "I heard you rescued Tavik's daughter. Tell me, who were those kidnappers anyway?" The tavern was a thick stew of whispers and the scent of stale ale. Fang Hao sat at the bar, accepting a cold beer from the proprietress. "I only encountered them in passing," he murmured, "a human and an orc. I do not know who they are." The proprietress crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing as she searched her memory. Suddenly, her face brightened. Was there an orc with a mace? Not the brightest fellow. Fang Hao's expression gave him away. She had nailed it. "It was them," she confirmed with a nod. "They called themselves a mercenary group, asking questions all over town." Before moving to serve a rowdy group of patrons, she slid a plate of sliced meat toward him. "Complimentary," she whispered. "Come back often." As she walked away, Fang Hao turned his attention to the notice board. Nestled among advertisements for exotic dances were 2 single-page maps, one for a bandit camp and another for a pond monster. "Thinking of playing the hero?" the proprietress asked, returning to the counter. "Just curious," Fang Hao replied. "Why do bandits still roam so close to a city with guards?" She sighed, wiping a glass. "The guards tried. Years ago, if the army was strong, the bandits fled. If the army was weak, the bandits won. Now, as long as they do not attack the city, everyone just looks the other way. There are hundreds of them." Fang Hao, "Do not do anything stupid." "I am not going myself," he lied smoothly. "I know some mercenaries who might be interested. How much for the maps?" 5 gold each." He counted out 10 human gold coins and tucked the maps away. Just as he prepared to leave, a middle-aged man in a gray robe stepped onto a wooden platform. The tavern fell silent as the man took a long, dramatic gulp of beer. "Tonight's tale," the storyteller announced, his voice echoing through the room, "the bloodthirsty Countess, Hilda Ford." He spoke of a beautiful senator's daughter who helped the poor until she was seduced by a demon. He described a horrific scene: 12 exquisite swords, 12 murdered children, and a countess nailed to a stake of repentance. Fang Hao's heart hammered against his ribs. 12 swords, it was exactly like the mission for the 12 Swords of Atonement. The storyteller reached into a bag and an attendant stepped forward, holding an ornate short sword aloft. "This," the man cried, "is one of those 12 blades, 1,000 gold coins, and this piece of history is yours." The tavern erupted in laughter. 1,000 gold, you think we are fools? But through the mockery, a single, calm voice rang out. "I will take it." Every head in the room turned toward Fang Hao. "Damn!" Fang Hao cursed his poor timing under his breath, though he maintained a mask of cool indifference before the crowded tavern. "The story was told well," he announced softly, "and the dagger's design is quite ornate. Buying it for a collection is fine." The crowd whispered. They recognized him now, the man who saved the merchant's daughter. He was rich, certainly, but spending 1,000 gold coins on a cursed story seemed foolish. The middle-aged salesman, palms drenched in sweat, quickly finalized the deal before Fang Hao could change his mind. The weapon was beautiful, forged from a snow-white, shimmering metal, but its attributes told a darker tale. It was the Sparing Guilt dagger, a purple-grade item with Tier 3 damage. The description chilled the air, a dagger that killed its own master. Rumor has it that anyone who obtains it will meet their end in agony. Fang Hao gestured for the salesman to sit, ordering him a large mug of beer. "Did that countess really kill 12 children?" he asked, leaning in. The man drank deeply. "I heard she drugged their families with potions, but that was 50 years ago. I'm just a storyteller, not a witness." He paused, then whispered a secret that made Fang Hao's eyes sharpen. "I don't know where the other relics are, but the city lord of Prul, he has one. If you have the courage, you can try for it." After paying the tab, Fang Hao gathered his acquisitions from Tavik the merchant: a silk loom blueprint, 2 maps of the wilderness, 500 silkworms, and 500 cocoons. Under the silent escort of his skeleton army, he departed the city, racing against the setting sun. By the time they reached his territory, the sky had bruised into a deep purple. Yer, the head maid, hurried out to greet them. "Master and Jia, you've returned." "Yer," Fang Hao directed, "find any maids who know how to raise silkworms. Bring them to the farm immediately." He stood before the small wooden hut of the silkworm farm and focused his mind. With a surge of resources, 2,800 units of wood and 12 natural gems, the structure groaned and expanded, shifting into a level 6 facility. 2 rabbit maids stepped forward, bowing low. "Master, our village used to sell cocoons. We know the old ways." "Good," Fang Hao replied, relieved to have experts. "The farm is yours to manage." Leaving the girls to their work, he made one final stop at the tailor shop. Inside, the skeleton tailor, Soy, was hunched over a workbench, meticulously stitching a new design from Fang Hao's memories, a sailor suit. "Good evening, Lord," Soy rattled, rising to greet his master. Fang Hao nodded, watching the tireless undead hands move. The trip had been productive, but the mystery of the Countess had only just begun. "Lord, the sailor suits are being rushed," Soy called out, assuming the Lord was there for the uniforms. But Fang Hao settled into a seat with a calm, steady smile. "There is no rush, Soy. I am here to discuss the silk." With a focused thought, Fang Hao opened his lord's book and activated the silk weaving machine blueprint. A brilliant flash of light filled the workshop as the hundredfold amplification triggered, instantly conjuring 101 weaving machines into the open space. Soy stood breathless, watching the massive pile of machinery appear from thin air. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Fang Hao made his way to a quiet residence. "Xiaoyu, are you there?" he called softly. A small head poked through the wall before the specter's entire body floated out, her ghostly skirt fluttering as she gave a slight curtsy. Fang Hao reached into his pack and produced the remission dagger. The moment the blade caught the light, Xiaoyu froze. A strange, haunting radiance began to emanate from her translucent form. Her power surged, her rank leaping violently from Tier 3 all the way to Tier 5. "It feels as if it once belonged to me," she whispered, her eyes wide with a mix of wonder and dread. Fang Hao recounted the grim legends surrounding the blade, the dark stories of the 12 children, but he spoke with a gentle, grounding tone. "The past is gone, Xiaoyu, one must look forward." Touched by his kindness, her loyalty climbed to 95 points. The next morning, golden sunlight spilled across the bed as Yer sat on the edge, quietly dressing. "Master, it is still very early," she murmured. Fang Hao sat up, sighing as he watched her. "There is too much to do today, Yer." Outside, a skeleton merchant approached with urgent news. "Lord, the Merchant Alliance has restocked. A blueprint for silver thread silk alchemist robes is available." Fang Hao hurried to the Alliance building, meeting Captain Du Jin at the counter. He purchased the rare, blue-tier blueprint and immediately signed an order for 10 robes. The reward was substantial: 10,000 war coins, a stamina inspiration potion, and 10 points of academy influence. The gears of his growing empire were finally beginning to turn. Fang Hao stared at the blueprint for the alchemist robes. For the natives, crafting these was a grueling manual process, but for a lord it was a matter of a single click. He set the production quantity to 1. Immediately the system chimed. The hundredfold amplification had triggered, granting him 101 silver-thread silk alchemist robes. These blue-tier garments weren't just for show. They boosted alchemy success rates by 1% and reduced brewing time by 2%. Fang Hao summoned Du Jin and a skeleton merchant. "Deliver 10 of these to the Alchemist Guild," he commanded, "and tell them, if they want more, they must specify our workshop for the next order. We cannot have the other 90 robes sitting in storage forever." With the business settled, Fang Hao turned to his maps. Between the bandit camp and the pond monster, the pond was the more strategic target. "Njia," he shouted. The warrior appeared, curious as ever. "Prepare the troops. We are heading to the pond. Tell the infantry to bring extra archers and spearmen. We need range if the enemies are submerged." 10 minutes later, a terrifying legion stood ready, 5 bone dragons, 1,000 skeleton ogres, and 50,000 skeleton soldiers. Fang Hao activated divine descent, leading the march through the vast southern forests. They passed human villages where terrified residents bolted their gates, but Fang Hao ignored them, focused solely on the objective. 2 hours later, the air grew thick and humid. Fang Hao halted the army near a massive, moss-covered pond, and Jia was eager to charge, but Fang Hao held her back. "Wait, I will scout first." He shifted his consciousness into a skeleton giant bat and took to the sky. Below, the pond was surrounded by jagged, gray boulders and colorful fungi. It seemed peaceful, until it wasn't. Swoosh. One by one, his escort bats vanished into thin air. No bones, no debris, just silence. Then he saw it. A jagged boulder below suddenly split open, revealing a cavernous mouth. A long, scarlet tongue lashed out like a whip, snaring Fang Hao's bat and dragging it into the darkness. Fang Hao jolted awake in his physical body, his heart hammering against his ribs. He quickly re-entered the camp and looked at a waiting Njia. "It is a rock," he gasped, "a rock that opens its mouth and eats people." Njia tilted her head, pondering the mystery. A giant lizard, perhaps. They hunt exactly like that. Fang Hao watched the massive undead army advance. Tens of thousands of skeletons marching with bone-chilling precision toward the strange, fungus-covered rocks. He climbed onto the bone dragon, pulling Njia up beside him, and soared over the pond. "Those rocks," Fang Hao pointed, "they aren't what they seem." Njia narrowed her eyes, sensing nothing, until whoosh, a thick crimson tongue shot from the earth, coiling around the dragon's ribs like a meaty whip. "Damn!" Fang Hao hissed as the hidden beast tried to drag the massive dragon down. These were granite giant toads, Tier 7 monsters disguised as stone. "Dragon breath," Fang Hao commanded. The bone dragon dove, unleashing a pillar of black, necrotic energy straight into a toad's gaping maw. The creature swelled and bang, exploded into a shower of gore. "Wait," Fang Hao realized, "don't blast their mouths. We need the bones intact. Target the rocks around the pond instead." Several bone dragons began to circle, their death breaths melting the toad's camouflaged skin like wax. As the Tier 10 dragons cleared the perimeter, the skeleton infantry swarmed in to finish the survivors. Njia stepped onto a fresh carcass, poking the mushrooms growing on its back. "Do you think these are edible?" she asked curiously. Fang Hao glared at her. "Am I starving you? Do not bring those back to poison the living people in the territory." Njia shrugged, sheepishly returning to the fray. The toads retreated into the pond for a final stand, but the undead were relentless. Arrows and magic missiles rained down for over 2 hours until the water was choked with floating corpses. The battle was won, but the land was empty of treasure. Fang Hao scanned the surface. "Search the bottom," he ordered. Skeletons vanished beneath the dark water, eventually hauling up a heavy, golden chest. Fang Hao snapped it open, finding blueprints for a giant toad leather set. He inspected the leather gloves, level 2 defense, a 2% increase to production speed. "Useful for the workers," he muttered, "but useless for war." He signaled the army to move out. The silence of the pond finally restored. Fang Hao gazed at the attributes of the giant toad set, realizing he had completely misjudged its purpose. This wasn't armor for the battlefield. It was a shield for the laborers, a creator of wealth. With its 1% increase in movement speed and 2% boost to production, it was the perfect gear for his laboring skeletons and Zhang Bin's farmers. Among the spoils lay the Lingwu crystals. He had assumed they were elven, but the description corrected him. They belonged to the fairy faction. A bizarre image flashed through his mind, a petite, winged fairy passionately kissing a hulking orc, but he quickly shook his head to clear the unsettling thought. By 3 or 4 in the afternoon, the massive undead army began its journey home. Along the way, villagers fled behind tightly closed gates, watching the silent legion pass with growing dread. Back at the Lord's manor, the air was calm. Yer and the rabbit maids were hanging curtains when Fang Hao arrived. She greeted him with a soft smile, asking about his gains. "It was okay," Fang Hao replied, "but nothing too surprising." Soon the carts rolled in. Njia tossed him a stack of blueprints and rare materials, which he quickly recorded. Suddenly, a prompt appeared. 124 stone-patterned giant toads were ready for slaughter. He clicked confirm. Instantly, 148,800 units of meat and thousands of leathers filled the warehouse. He felt a brief pang of regret. He should have converted them into skeleton toads, but the deed was done. Among the remains were toxic stone-patterned mushrooms, definitely not for eating. Fang Hao messaged Zhang Bin, coordinating for the nearly 900 human farmers in his territory. Then, he opened his crafting menu. He set the production for 70 toad skin sets, and the hundredfold amplification triggered. 7,070 sets of gear rained down in the cave. He called over a timid fox maid, her large, fluffy tail twitching with nerves, and sent her to find the blood hunter. When the bat-winged commander arrived, Fang Hao ordered the equipment to be distributed to the labor skeletons and the pigman village. Finally, as darkness fell, Fang Hao visited the Merchant Alliance. Du Jin, the skeleton merchant, waited behind the counter. He handed over the day's special reward, a bottle of physical enhancement potion. It promised a strong physique, a way to push his human stamina to the limit. Fang Hao stared at the vial and whispered, "Damn, that is just unreasonable." Fang Hao scowled at the floating text, his frustration mounting. It simply didn't make sense. The information was clear. The effects of the physical enhancement potion could not be stacked. Even worse, using it would cause any previously learned magic skills like Fire Arrow or Cloudy Mist to vanish forever. He gripped the vial, his teeth gritting in disappointment. He had dreamed of being a battle mage, much like Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, holding a staff in one hand and a sharp iron sword in the other. "My lord, is there a problem?" Du Jin asked, noticing his master SGR. "Miss." Fang Hao sighed heavily, carefully tucking the potion away. "I can't use this, not without losing my magic." Du Jin bowed slightly, his voice calm and professional. Enhancement potions are meant to stimulate the body's latent potential, my lord. They are not simple buffs, therefore they cannot be layered." Fang Hao nodded, conceding the point. After a brief discussion about custom orders for alchemist robes, he slung his bag over his shoulder and headed home. Dinner that evening was a revelation. Yer hurried to the table, carrying a large, steaming pot filled with sliced meat and vibrant vegetables. It was the hot pot Fang Hao had described to her once in passing. The broth bubbled with a rich, reddish hue, sending a spicy, aromatic steam billowing through the room. Beside him, Njia's eyes were locked on the pot. Her stomach let out a loud, ravenous gurgle. "Let's eat," Fang Hao commanded, lifting his chopsticks. The meat was tender, numbing, and perfectly spiced. "Yer, this is incredible. It's even better than the real thing." As they ate, Fang Hao opened the Lord's book to the chat channel. The messages were desperate. Dozens of transmigrators were complaining about a lack of salt. Some even joked about licking their own salty sweat just to flavor their meat. Seeing an opportunity, Fang Hao snapped a few photos of his lush dinner and posted them with a caption about washing away the day's fatigue. The channel exploded with envy and hunger. "I'm listing 10 portions of this seasoning base," Fang Hao typed, "for 5 units of rare resources each." Despite the high price, the seasoning sold out in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, a private notification chimed. A lord named Tian Jiang was reaching out with a unique offer. He presented a 4-legged land-walking giant lizard flute, a tool to summon a powerful mount, in exchange for 5 units of rejuvenation spring and 1 portion of hot pot seasoning. Fang Hao leaned back, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. The trade for a mount was about to begin. "What is this thing?" Fang Hao asked, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet of the lord's manor. "Does it summon a troop type, or a mount?" Tian Jiang's reply came quickly, tinged with a note of desperation. "A mount, but it possesses the combat strength of a Tier 5 creature. I didn't dare use it. My subordinates are badly injured, and I am forced to put it up for sale." Tian was a cautious man, but he had been pushed to the brink. A group of mysterious lizardmen, half merchants, half pilgrims, had set up camp near his territory. When his villagers began to disappear, only to be found later, tortured and broken, Tian knew he had to act. He had gambled everything on a single, brutal ambush. By luring the high-tier lizardmen into a forest of traps, he had secured a victory, but at a staggering cost. Half of his men were dead, and the survivors were clinging to life. "I have mounts already," Fang Hao countered, thinking of his horses and the massive bone dragons. "This shepherd's flute of yours isn't of much help to me." Tian's heart tightened. He knew Fang Hao wasn't bargaining. He truly didn't need it. "Don't, big shot," Tian pleaded. "There are still wounded men waiting for treatment. How about this 3 units of rejuvenation spring, and I will throw in the cargo saddle blueprint as well." Fang Hao checked his inventory. He had enough. Fine, he replied, put it up for trade. The deal was struck. Fang Hao exchanged 3 units of rejuvenation spring and 1 block of hot pot seasoning for the 4-legged land giant lizard flute and the blueprint. With the trade complete, the wooden whistle, carved like a fine orcish ornament, materialized in his palm. Where are you going? Njia asked, watching him stride toward the exit. To see a lizard, Fang Hao teased, tossing the flute into the air and catching it. The two walked together, past the towering walls and out beneath the city gates. Fang Hao raised the flute and blew a sharp, crisp note that sliced through the afternoon air. Silence followed until a heavy, rhythmic thumping erupted from the woods. A massive silhouette, the size of an adult elephant, barreled toward them, scattering skeleton workers like dry leaves. Njia tensed, her fist tightening for a strike, but the beast skidded to a halt, its eyes wide and curious. It was a Tier 7 giant lizard, docile, powerful, and capable of vanishing into the terrain. Njia stepped forward, her skepticism melting away as she patted the creature's thick, muscular thigh. "Whoa," she whispered, a grin spreading across her face. "Not bad, Fang Hao, this is actually pretty cool." Fang Hao stared up and blinked. The giant lizard was massive, an elephant-sized rhinoceros with the head and scales of a predator. Beside him, Njia's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Let's take this big guy for a spin," she cheered, already eager Oh, mount the beast. Fang Hao opened his Book of Lords to the blueprint. He needed 20 units of tough wood, 350 leather, 150 tough leather, 80 iron, and 50 metal parts. He clicked craft, and the hundredfold amplification roared to life. In an instant, 101 cargo saddles piled up in the dirt. They strapped one onto the lizard, and Njia leaped up with effortless grace, gesturing for Fang Hao to join her. "You sit in the back," she teased earnestly, "it's more comfortable." "Just drive," Fang Hao grumbled, climbing the rope ladder. "The city gates are about to close." The lizard shot forward like a whirlwind. It was faster than a horse at full gallop, smooth, powerful, and terrifyingly stable. Njia's laughter was lost in the whistling wind, and by the time they returned, she was hiccuping from the sheer adrenaline. "It runs, hiccup, so steadily," she managed to say. Later, Fang Hao visited the transformation field. The stone grouper toad had become a Tier 5 skeleton giant toad. He checked its stats, but his face fell. It possessed mighty leap and water mastery, but his hopes for a specialized anti-air system were crushed. "Go wait outside the city," he ordered, watching the undead toads hop away into the twilight. The next morning, after some light exercise and breakfast with Du Jin, it was time for business. The bandit camp southwest of Pearl City. Fang Hao cast Divine Descent, his consciousness shifting into his undead vessel. He didn't take a slow ground army. Instead, he summoned 100 bone dragons, each carrying a Tier 5 skeleton ogre. They soared high into the clouds, bypassing Pearl City to remain a ghostly secret in the sky. 2 hours later, the camp came into view. It was a sprawling fortress of wood and stone. Fang Hao scanned the grounds, spotting the loot and the prisoners. His heart skipped a beat. One hostage was wearing modern sportswear, another survivor. "Get closer," Fang Hao whispered, his voice cold and focused. "Prepare the dragon breath." The lead bone dragon folded its wings, diving toward the earth, and 100 shadows followed, ready to unleash hell from above. The sky vanished beneath the wings of 100 bone dragons. Sunlight filtered through their bleached ribs, casting a sickly malt-like glow over the bandit camp below. Panic erupted, a frantic, useless chaos as the first beams of death breath descended. Bandits, mostly Tier 1 and Tier 2 weaklings, withered into skeletons instantly. The dragons circled, their massive claws tearing through stone roofs like parchment to incinerate those hiding within. Next, the dragons lowered their altitude, allowing massive skeleton ogres to leap from their backs. The remaining bandits were cut down where they stood, their screams silenced by heavy adze blades. From the central stone buildings, 5 leaders emerged, 3 humans and 2 orcs. They knelt in the dirt, trembling and pleading for mercy. Fang Hao leaped from a dragon's back, his gaze cold. When the bandits tried to offer a Tier 4 archer as a scapegoat, Fang Hao's fury flared. He delivered 2 heavy kicks to the true Tier 7 leader, bang, bang, before issuing a chilling command: "Kill everyone except him." In a flash of steel, the other 4 heads rolled away, Dai Liu Liu, into the dust. While the skeleton ogres stripped the camp of its meager riches, Fang Hao entered the main stone house. In the master bedroom, he discovered a golden treasure chest. Inside lay a purple blueprint for a faceless one's hut, along with blueprints for a city wall and iron swords. He tucked the rewards away, his mind already calculating their value. In a quiet corner of the camp, several villagers hung from wooden stakes, spectators to the massacre. Among them was a man in a tattered blue tracksuit and broken glasses. As the orc girl and Gia approached with her skeletal guards, the prisoners squeezed their eyes shut, playing dead, and Gia wasn't fooled. With a sharp swing of an adze, the ropes snapped. Bang, bang, bang. The prisoners hit the ground with muffled groans when the man in the tracksuit refused to move, and Gia delivered a sharp kick that sent him tumbling. "Don't waste my time," she growled. Trembling, the man was brought before Fang Hao. He stammered out his story, explaining how his village had been raided. Facing the hollow eyes of the undead commander, the man plopped onto the ground in a frantic bow. "Thank you, sirs, for saving us," he cried. "I will set up memorial tablets for you and offer incense day and night." Fang Hao looked at the trembling man before him, unsure whether to call him brilliant or foolish. "Use the energy you spent begging for mercy to develop well in the future," Fang Hao commanded, gesturing to the piles of furniture he was leaving behind. The man was stunned, wondering if the undead were truly capable of such kindness. Fang Hao didn't linger. He watched as the bone dragon's death breath reduced the bandit corpses to piles of white bone, then mounted the massive beast. "Do not speak of the undead," he warned, his voice a low threat, "or I might pay your territory a visit tomorrow." By noon, the group returned to camp. While Njia dragged the weeping bandit leader toward a cage, Fang Hao constructed a mysterious new building, the Faceless One's hut. Inside, a blonde woman with a stiff, eerie smile explained the trade. This was no troop recruitment center. It was an intelligence agency. For a heavy fee, they would uncover any secret, though a failure only offered a 20% refund. Fang Hao considered seeking information on the Skullcrusher tribe, but decided to trust his own scouts for now. After lunch, Fang Hao and Njia rode a giant lizard toward Pearl City. Just outside the visible range of the walls, Fang Hao halted. "Kill him," he said coldly. With one swift stroke of a knight's sword, Njia claimed the bandit leader's head for the bounty. As they approached the city gates, the guards panicked at the sight of the massive lizard. After a brief, awkward display of the beast's docility, which involved a spray of mucus and a terrifying roar, Fang Hao agreed to leave the mount in the stables. The pair marched directly to the lord's manor, where the guards met them with mockery. "The two of you killed the chief," one sneered, his eyes full of doubt, and Njia bristled with indignation, but Fang Hao simply reached into a blood-stained leather pouch. He pulled out the severed head and thrust it into the guard's face. The man recoiled, his eyes widening as he recognized the pale, terrified features of the bandit they had hunted for years. The message was clear: the job was done. The city lord's hall was spacious and bright. Sunlight filtered through drawn blue curtains while the scent of heavy incense wafted from a nearby wooden table. Fang Hao sat composed, flipping through his book, but beside him Njia was a storm of restless energy. She paced and muttered dark promises under her breath, whispering about bringing a bone dragon to tear the house down if they were made to wait much longer. Suddenly, the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of armored boots echoed through the side corridor. In walked Cyril, the city lord of Prul, a man of nearly 50 years with a neatly groomed beard and a piercing, calculating gaze. Unbeknownst to his guests, Cyril had spent their 20-minute wait investigating them. From the reports of the cloth merchant Tavik to the whispers at the local tavern, the conclusion was the same. Fang Hao was a wealthy, powerful young master from a great family, capable of mobilizing a private army on a whim. Cyril offered a practiced, noble smile. "So, these are the heroes who took the bandit leader's head." Fang Hao stood with a polite grin, while Njia rose with a reluctant, sharp scowl. As servants brought local pastries and wine, Cyril feigned ignorance and probed for their story. Fang Hao, ever the strategist, wove a seamless blend of truth and fiction. He spoke of saving Tavik's daughter in the forest and spotting the bounty notice at the tavern. Cyril sipped his wine, his eyes flickering with hidden thoughts. The story was perfect. He was now convinced this young man was a highborn noble merely looking for an opportunity to temper himself. "Bring the reward," Cyril commanded. A guard returned, hauling a heavy wooden box filled with 1,000 glittering gold coins. But Fang Hao's attention had already drifted. His eyes were locked on a display case containing a magnificent rapier with a snow-white hilt and a dazzling blade. He stepped toward it, his fingers almost touching the glass. This was the Sword of Atonement, a purple Tier 5 weapon. Cyril joined him, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "A beautiful piece, but it carries a dark history. It belonged to a famous countess, and they say any who wield it meet a bitter, agonizing end." Fang Hao didn't flinch. He gripped the hilt, feeling the cold, lethal weight of the blade. He looked Cyril directly in the eye and asked, "I like this very much. Lord Cyril, would you be willing to part with it? Name your price." "The Sword of Atonement, a blade whispered to bring ruin to any who treasure it." Cyril, the city lord of Prul, once laughed at such superstitions, but as his only son withered away from a mysterious illness, the old hero's skepticism turned to a heavy, rhythmic dread. When Fang Hao inquired about the rapier, Cyril saw an opportunity to cast the shadow from his house. "You aren't afraid of the misfortune?" Cyril asked, his voice raspy with fatigue. Fang Hao shrugged, his expression blunt. He was merely a middleman for a quest. "I'm giving it away as a gift," he replied. "Passing it through my hands shouldn't count against me, right?" A deal was struck, 1,000 gold coins for the exquisite weapon. Before departing, Fang Hao secured permission to open a shop in Prul, planting the seeds for a future restaurant. Fang Hao and the spirited Njia soon departed the city atop their massive giant lizard. The creature's heavy footfalls kicked up thick clouds of dust as they raced back to the safety of the territory. Upon arrival, the lizard settled into its quarters, and Fang Hao sought out Xiaoyu, the ghost. He presented the rapier, and as her fingers brushed the hilt, a spectral radiance erupted. Xiaoyu surged in power, ascending instantly to Tier 7. Through the fading glow, she whispered of fragmented memories of swordsmanship trials and the white robes of the Holy See. Fang Hao offered a quiet word of comfort, urging her not to let the shadows of a past life eclipse her present. Later that evening, over a dinner of steak and savory vegetable pizza, Fang Hao discussed his next venture with the rabbit maid, Yer, and the ever-hungry Njia. "A hot pot restaurant?" Yer asked, her long ears twitching in confusion. "But master, will the humans know how to use chopsticks?" Fang Hao grinned. "We'll give them training clamps. They'll learn fast once they taste the broth." They laughed, debating names for the shop, until a sudden, cold chime resonated through the air, the system prompt. A new random event had arrived, Foolhardy Courage. A party trial quest was set to begin in 10 hours, a trial where lords must stand alone, forbidden from bringing their heroes or their armies. Fang Hao stared at the glowing text. The countdown had begun, 9 hours, 59 minutes, and counting. The sharp chime of a notification tone cut through the silence, causing Fang Hao to freeze in place. The next event mission had arrived far earlier than anyone had anticipated. He opened the Lord's book. The regional channel was already a chaotic storm of frantic messages. "No soldiers allowed," one user cried out. "What is the point without an army? Are we supposed to just hack away at monsters ourselves?" This was a trial of the self, a test of raw, individual strength. Fang Hao felt a cold knot of unease. 80% of his power rested in his heroes and his skeleton legions. Without them, he was just a man who might have died on day one. Suddenly, a new prompt flickered across the pages. A green-tier merchant caravan carriage blueprint had been unlocked. It was Zhang Bin. His subordinate's progress was automatically syncing to his own book. A private message pinged. "Boss, are you joining the trial?" Zhang Bin asked. Fang Hao hesitated. Zhang Bin possessed the physique of an ordinary villager. "Aren't you afraid of the danger?" he replied. "I have you, boss," Zhang Bin countered. "Besides, if I don't go, the gap between me and the others will only get wider." Fang Hao realized the boy was right. This mission wasn't a death sentence, it was an opportunity for growth. He stood up, rummaging through his study cabinet until his fingers closed around a glass vial, the physical enhancement potion. "I am trading this to you," Fang Hao messaged. "Drink it tonight. It will increase your stamina and strength. You need to be ready for whatever tomorrow brings." After a brief, hesitant exchange, Zhang Bin initially protesting out of modesty, the trade was finalized, 1 rare potion for 10 units of wood. As that chat closed, a new notification bubbled up. It was Dong Jiayu. "Brother Hao, do you want me to carry you?" she teased. Fang Hao remembered her recent injuries. "Is your wound even healed?" he replied. "This trial is no small matter." In response, Dong Jiayu sent a photo of a certificate she had carried from Earth, a national women's martial arts routine competition champion. "Routines," Fang Hao typed, skeptical. "Isn't that just for show?" "I am the real deal," she countered, her confidence radiating through the text. "I am super powerful." Fang Hao considered her grit. She was the only one who had dared to lead farmers into a tomb on the second day. She was exactly the ally he needed. "All right then," Fang Hao conceded. "Our 3-person team is full. I will call you when we assemble tomorrow." The stage was set and the trial awaited. The early morning sun rose over the territory, signaling the long-awaited day of the trial. Fang Hao woke with the weight of the mission on his mind. He knew he could not afford to be lazy. After washing up, he summoned Blood Hunter and Year, the two pillars of his domain, to manage the territory's operations in his absence. Year, dressed in her black and white maid outfit, knelt by his side at the dining table. Her voice trembled as she served a breakfast of toasted bread, steaks, and vegetable soup. "Master, please come back early once it is over." Fang Hao reached out, gently touching her large ears to comfort her. "Don't worry, it is just some minor battles. There won't be any danger." After eating, Fang Hao organized his gear, his apprentice magic robe, the spark, and a black iron knight sword. He accepted Zhang Bin's party invitation, and a brilliant white glow enveloped him. He materialized in a city that felt remarkably alive, a medieval contrast to his own silent, undead realm. Zhang Bin stood before him, shirtless and bronzed, proudly showing off the bulging muscles he had gained from a physical enhancement potion. Moments later, a flash of light brought Dong Jiayu into the party. She was a striking figure, roughly 21 years old with a ponytail, clutching a war spear. She initially mistook the muscular Zhang Bin for the leader, her face flushing crimson when she realized her error. Fang Hao provided her with superior plate armor, and the three of them prepared for the unknown. Suddenly, a system prompt flickered in the air. Historical battle, the dilemma of Manhwa. The mission was simple: help the village escape its doom. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. The world shifted instantly. Suddenly the air was thick with the sounds of weeping and distant, frantic shouting. The three found themselves in a private room of a tavern where women and children huddled in the halls for refuge. A sharp knock sounded at the door. "You three," the captain requests your presence. They were led to a back room filled with Tier 4 human warriors. The atmosphere was heavy with the scent of iron and sweat. The captain, a weathered, middle-aged man, looked up from a cluttered map. "Damned undead attacked last night," he growled, his voice rasping with exhaustion. "I am severely short-handed. Help us retake the armory to the north, and we might have a chance." Fang Hao leaned in, his gaze sharp and steady. "All right, give me a map." After leaving the tavern, the three companions, Fang Hao, Zhang Bin, and Dong Jiayu, hurried toward the north. The village was a blur of activity. Women and children treated the wounded while the men labored on the front lines. "Boss, you're the expert on the undead," Zhang Bin whispered as they walked. Fang Hao scoffed. "Expert, these things have no intelligence. You can't exactly reason with them." Dong Jiayu leaned in, her eyes curious. "But brother Hao, doesn't your territory have undead buildings? Is that why we're here?" "Don't talk nonsense," Fang Hao replied quickly. "I'm a good person." They pressed on, leaving the villagers behind until only abandoned wooden houses remained. Suddenly, *clang*, a metal object struck the cobblestones. The trio tensed, weapons drawn, as several rotting figures shuffled from the shadows. These were Tier 1 corpses and a Tier 3 venomous rotting corpse. Fang Hao didn't hesitate. He raised his staff, the spark, and unleashed a fiery red magic arrow. It pierced the venomous creature, causing its body to erupt in a cloud of toxic green dust. "Back up," Fang Hao shouted. "Don't breathe that in." They retreated, drawing the remaining monsters into a melee. Zhang Bin's knight's sword clashed against the undead, while Dong Jiayu fought with practiced ease. She was no stranger to the dead, having lived near an ancient tomb. The battle was relentless. For every corpse they felled, more emerged from the houses. By the time they reached a small building across from the armory, they were gasping for air, their stamina nearly spent. Through the window, they saw the problem. Nearly 300 undead, including Tier 2 spearmen, stood between them and the warehouse. "Boss," Zhang Bin panted, "there are too many. I'll die of exhaustion before I kill them all." "Wait," Fang Hao commanded, drinking a mental potion. "I'll thin the herd first." He pointed the spark through the broken window. Suddenly, the sky darkened. A massive shadow loomed overhead as a giant fireball, like a falling meteorite, streaked toward the earth. Boom! The ground buckled. A massive crater swallowed the center of the undead horde, sending earth and bone flying like shrapnel. "Clear the edges," Fang Hao ordered. They rushed out, finishing the dazed survivors before reaching the stone brick warehouse. The heavy doors groaned as they pushed them open, revealing rows of dusty weapon racks. "Look at this," Zhang Bin called out. Among the basic blueprints for iron swords and bows, they found a rare prize, a full set of Manhwa Guard leather armor blueprints. Fang Hao examined the green-tier items, noting the bonuses to movement and reload speed. It was the perfect gear for an elite archer unit. The long, bloody trek to the north had finally paid off. Fang Hao stood in the dim, dusty armory, clutching the blueprints. He glanced at Dong Jiayu, hesitant to claim the rewards for himself. He knew his hundredfold amplification ability made him the logical choice to record the designs, but he didn't want to overlook her bravery. "Brother, how you should take them," Jiayu said her vow. "Ice generous and steady, just make a few sets for me when the time comes." Fang Hao nodded and recorded the green tier blueprints into his book, while Jiayu selected a few white tier designs for her own collection. High above on the roof, Zhang Bin hoisted the flag of Manhwa, a signal to the guards that the armory had been reclaimed. Immediately, a system notification chimed in their minds. They had earned rewards: 100 human influence, healing potions, and a rare choice of 3 special items. "Choose the physical enhancement potion for Dong Jiayu," Fang Hao directed. Zhang Bin handed the vial to her. Jiayu didn't hesitate. She tilted her head back and swallowed the liquid in a single gulp. Moments later, her face flushed a deep, burning red. Sweat beaded on her forehead as her very constitution shifted and strained. 5 minutes of pained silence passed before she finally stood, stretching her limbs with a newfound grace. "I feel full of strength," she whispered. Suddenly, clatter, clatter, clatter. The Manhwa guards burst through the doors. The captain's voice boomed through the hall. "Distribute armor and weapons to every villager who can fight. Hurry, everyone move." The armory became a whirlwind of clashing steel and silent desperation. The captain approached the trio, his expression grim. "The undead have gathered at the second line of defense. Follow us in the counterattack, but if you get the chance, break through and leave. This isn't your war, escape if you can." Fang Hao met his gaze with iron resolve. "We can win," he said firmly, "don't worry." 10 minutes later, they reached the barricades. The gate swung open with a heavy, metallic groan. "Kill!" the captain roared. The humans charged, their iron spears piercing the ranks of the rotting corpses. Fang Hao climbed the city wall, loosing fire arrows into the fray. He summoned 3 wood element attendant spirits, their vine-like arms whipping through the air with sharp cracks, binding the undead where they stood. For a moment, hope flickered until a terrifying, soul-piercing howl shattered the air. "Awu!" On a nearby roof, a Tier 7 doomsday direwolf looked down upon the slaughter. Its body was a nightmare of shredded meat and broken bone, black gas rising from its ribs like smoke. Its eyes glowed with a sickening green light. Fang Hao felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just a monster, it was a predator watching them with a cold, cunning intelligence. The true battle had only just begun. The doomed direwolf stood atop the roof, a nightmare draped in rotting flesh. Its level 7 presence loomed over the level 4 guard captain and his bloodshot soldiers. Zhang Bin, covered in gore and dented plate armor, whispered to Fang Hao that this monster was far beyond them. Fang Hao's voice remained low and steady. "If we do not kill it, we cannot clear the stage. Conserve your energy and find an opening." A haunting howl pierced the air, and the rotting corpses below surged forward in a frenzy. The guard captain roared, "Kill!" The direwolf leaped, a blur of decay tearing the head from a guard in one sickening crunch. It was a slaughter, until the captain slammed his shield into the beast, sending it tumbling. "I will hold it off," he screamed. "Clear the rest." Fang Hao fired fire arrows in rapid succession, while his wood servant spirits lashed out with vine-like fingers to pierce the undead. But the captain was fading. The direwolf's massive claw struck thud, sending the leader flying across the dirt. As the beast lunged for the killing bite, Fang Hao raised his left hand. A blazing fireball erupted from his ring boom, igniting the wolf's mangy fur and forcing it back. The monster's eerie green eyes locked onto Fang Hao. It charged like a runaway carriage, knocking guards aside. Zhang Bin stepped in, bracing behind his kite shield. The impact was violent, sending Zhang Bin flying like a broken kite, but he had held the line. As the wood servants entangled the beast's limbs with vines, Dong Jiayu moved. She thrust her spear with lethal precision, piercing the direwolf's pupil. The creature howled in genuine agony. It pounced one last time, but Jiayu twisted her waist, using the beast's own momentum to drive her spear deep through its open maw. The spear tip erupted from the back of its skull. The massive body twitched, then went still. The captain beheaded the carcass just to be sure. As the city gates groaned shut, the 3 friends collapsed onto nearby logs, breathless and trembling. Then, the system notification chimed. Historical battle, Erlenha's dilemma, completed. The rewards materialized before them: a frost armor skill scroll, a death visage skill scroll, an incantation elixir, and the robes and staff of an apprentice. They had survived. Voice echoed through the silence. "Return countdown, 3, 2, 1. In a flash of blinding light, Fang Hao was home. He stood once again on the familiar soil of his own territory. After a quick message to Zhang Bin and Dong Jiayu to confirm their safety, he let out a long, jagged breath of relief. "Master," Yer called out, stepping from the stone tower. She blinked in surprise, unaware he had returned. "I am back, Fang Hao said, his voice weary. "I am hungry, please prepare lunch and have someone draw a bath." Time moved strangely between worlds. While the battle in Erlanha village had raged for 8 grueling hours, only 4 hours had passed in his territory. As hurried off, Fang Hao turned his attention to his spoils. He tore into the skill scrolls. First, frost armor. A surge of energy erupted, encasing his body in a shimmering, translucent layer of blue glass. Next came the Legion's skill Death Visit. This passive ability was terrifying. For every soldier that fell in battle, his entire army would gain a 1% boost to attack and defense, stacking up to a massive 100%. With his endless hordes of undead, reaching that limit would be effortless. He then checked in with his comrades. Zhang Bin had become a literal fortress, gaining the Iron Wall and Hold the Line skills, perfect for a man destined to be a human shield. Dong Jiayu, on the other hand, had gained a massive boost to her movement and attack speeds. "Master, the bathwater is ready," a maid announced. Fang Hao made his way to the manor and sank into the steaming tub. The warmth was heavenly. Suddenly, the door creaked open. A pair of soft, delicate hands rested on his shoulders and began to massage the tension away. He turned, expecting but found the white fox maid instead. "Sister is busy in the kitchen," she whispered, her eyes downcast. Fang Hao remembered his final reward, the incantation elixir. He reached for his bag, uncapped the vial, and swallowed the liquid in one gulp. The reaction was instantaneous. An icy chill slid down his throat, followed by a violent, searing heat. His blood began to boil. His skin flushed a deep, angry crimson like a cooked crab. "Master, what is wrong?" the fox girl cried out. "Hot, it is too hot," Fang Hao groaned, lunging out of the bathtub to let the air cool his burning skin. The fox girl stared at him, her face turning a shade of red that rivaled his own. Misinterpreting his gasps and his nakedness, she began to tremblingly remove her own clothes. She stepped toward him, her voice a mere whisper. "Master, I do not know how to do this very well." The medicinal fire in Fang Hao's veins met a different kind of heat. An hour later, the two emerged from the steam, the trial finally, truly, behind them. The tension in the Coldwind Mountains was a physical weight. Following Fang Hao's annihilation of the 300,000-strong army, the surrounding tribes lived in a state of constant, shivering dread. In the shadows of the Skullcrusher Chieftain's Hall, Saul sat, his expression grim, facing a mountain of a man. This was the troll hero Raoxuan Caius, a 5-meter giant from the Bloodthroat tribe who toyed with human skulls as if they were mere trinkets. Saul begged for an alliance to eliminate the undead threat, but Caius only sneered, calling the great chieftain trash. Despite the humiliation, Saul had no choice but to bow. When he offered a 30-70 split of the spoils, Caius's rough voice roared like a beast. The troll demanded everything, all the loot, plus an additional 300,000 war coins, with orc warriors' hands twitching on their weapon hilt. Saul took a deep breath and agreed. An uneasy alliance was forged in the dark, a plan to strike the undead from 2 directions. Meanwhile, back at the territory, Fang Hao enjoyed a quiet lunch. He questioned his gentle maid, about inspiration potions, rare elixirs that could turn commoners into warriors. He hoped to bolster the strength of his people, to give them a fighting chance. Suddenly, the door slammed open, and Jia marched in, travel-worn but triumphant, dropping a silver treasure chest at Fang Hao's feet. She had been out adventuring on her giant lizard, bringing back bear carcasses and loot. Inside, Fang Hao found blueprints for an iron axe and a leather collar. He chuckled at the practicality of the necklace, while Njia boasted of her legendary luck. As night fell, Fang Hao checked the regional channel. The silence was broken by a flood of bitter voices. Transmigrators were finally finishing their trials, but the mood was toxic. One man complained of seafood allergies after fighting murlocs, while others told tales of betrayal. A user named Zai Yuanfei was being publicly shamed for ninjaing equipment and abandoning his team. The first attempt at cooperation among the lords had ended in a chaotic, digital shouting match. The next morning, Fang Hao found himself in Pearl City, a sharp razor pressed against his throat. He lay back in a barber's chair, the scent of soap filling the air as he received his first haircut in over 20 days. The barber, skeptical of Fang Hao's plan to open a catering business, made small talk. Fang Hao's eyes drifted to a bunny girl nearby as he inquired about the market for orc slaves. A new, calculated venture was beginning to take shape. "Cough, cough." The barber's voice was tactful as he mentioned the rabbit people girls, sold off as soon as they arrived in Pearl City. He finished the trim, wiping loose strands from Fang Hao's neck with a rough linen cloth. "All done, sir." Fang Hao stood and brushed himself off. Outside, Njia frowned at his new look. The nobles all keep their hair long and slicked back, she suggested. Fang Hao shrugged, unimpressed. I am not a noble and their style is not cool at all. They navigated the winding streets until they reached the tavern. Inside, the bartenders were clearing the wreckage of the night before. The landlady stood behind the counter, giving a long, deep stretch, her curvaceous figure displayed in a lazy, flirtatious moan that made the air feel suddenly heavy. She leaned over the counter, her voice dripping with honey. Coming so early, are you here for a drink or to chat with me? To chat, Fang Hao replied, sitting down. He asked about opening a shop on the commercial street. The landlady's expression shifted. She leaned close, her voice dropping to a cautious, rhythmic whisper. That shop across the way, it is not easy to buy. The owner offended someone, the son of the internal affairs supervisor. Meanwhile, outside the city gates, trouble was stirring. A man with an acne-scarred face circled the giant lizard in the stables. What the hell is this thing? He cursed, poking the beast with his iron scabbard. His lackeys joked about dragons, but the man was determined. I am going to be a dragon rider, he sneered, ordering them to untie the lead rope. Even as the guard captain warned them that the owner was a guest of the city lord, the acne-faced man persisted. I am acting according to city regulations, he lied, his eyes glinting with greed. I advise you best not to move it, a sharp voice cut through the air. Njia stepped forward, her white hair and beast ears marking her as a fierce outsider. The men laughed, drawing their iron swords, but they were far too slow. Bang! Njia's fist slammed into the leader's face. She didn't stop. Her strikes fell like heavy raindrops, asterisk thud, thud, thud asterisk, a relentless rhythm of flesh hitting flesh. The acne-faced man couldn't even scream. Enough, the guard captain shouted, hovering at a distance. You will kill him at this rate. Njia paused, her gaze cold and predatory. She calmly wiped the blood from her knuckles onto the man's clothes. They drew their swords first, she stated flatly. You saw that, right? The captain swallowed hard, nodding in silent, terrified agreement. The tavern fell into a heavy, uneasy silence as guards surrounded the building, trapping the bartenders in a state of frozen anticipation. The guard captain sat across from Fang Hao, his voice low and weighted with warning. He explained that by thrashing the son of the internal affairs supervisor, Fang Hao had crossed a man with enough influence to shutter any business in Pearl City. Nearby, the proprietress gasped, dropping a pottery cup that shattered against the floor with a sharp clatter asterisk as she realized Fang Hao had ignored her very warnings. Before the tension could break, a summons arrived. Fang Hao and Njia were led toward the city lord's mansion. Along the way, Njia whispered a nervous suggestion to flee, but Fang Hao remained remarkably calm. He knew that City Lord Cyril was only a Tier 5 hero, far less a threat than the powerful forces he already commanded. Inside the Grand Hall, they were met by Cyril and the tall, thin internal affairs supervisor, whose face was flushed with a deep, boiling rage. The supervisor began to scream, hurling insults and calling them barbarians, until the air suddenly grew cold. In a blur of motion, Fang Hao's white short sword was pressed firmly against the man's throat. Speak properly, Fang Hao whispered with a chilling edge. If you keep spitting when you talk, I will poke a hole in you. The room went deathly still. City Lord Cyril, sensing the immense, hidden power behind Fang Hao's casual demeanor, quickly stepped in to smooth things over. He declared that both sides were at fault and that the matter would be dropped entirely, much to the supervisor's silent, seething fury. Before departing, Fang Hao casually inquired about purchase. In the vacant shop across from the Rose Tavern, Cyril, perhaps relieved to avoid a war over a spoiled son, agreed immediately. The price was high, absurdly so, but the paperwork was settled. Back at the tavern, the bartenders were busy betting on whether Fang Hao would lose his head, when the door creaked open. Dazzling sunlight flooded the room as Fang Hao and Njia walked back in looking entirely unbothered. The proprietress stared in disbelief as Fang Hao reclaimed his seat at the bar, his voice steady as he asked her to finish the story she had started. The landlady set 2 frothing cups of beer onto the weathered table, leaning in with a glimmer of curiosity in her eyes. Are you truly interested in this story? She asked. Earlier, before the city guards had rudely interrupted, Fang Hao had spotted a peculiar bounty on the tavern's bulletin board. It wasn't a call for blood or blades, but an exploration bounty, a search for a legendary burial ground hidden in the mountains. I'm interested, Fang Hao replied, his voice steady. The landlady sighed, setting her rag aside as she sat across from him. She wove a tragic tale of a young, handsome city lord who fell in love with a girl who never aged. Their romance ended in blood when the girl was murdered by the city lord's enemies. It is said he buried her with the family's most precious treasures, countless gold and silver, right in the mountains to the west. Those damnable enemies, the landlady whispered, a tear escaping her eye. But Fang Hao wasn't moved by the tragedy. He took a sharp sip of beer and asked immediately, "Which mountains? Do you have a map?" The landlady gave him a sharp side-eye, realizing he was fishing for gold, not folklore. She pointed to a general location on his map just west of Pearl City. She warned him that while the location seemed fixed, the mountain range was vast, and the stingy mercenaries who posted the bounty were likely playing a trick. Many had searched over the last couple of days. All had returned empty-handed. "If I find it," Fang Hao promised with a smirk, "I'll give you a share." Leaving the city behind, Fang Hao and Njia mounted their giant lizard, thundering across the landscape until they reached their territory around 2 or 3 in the afternoon. They were greeted by Year and the maids. Fang Hao, his mind already turning toward his new acquisitions, had a specific request. "Year, find me a maid who can count or one who has worked as a merchant." Soon, a white foxwoman named Zio Bai stood before him, her head lowered cautiously. She possessed a rare skill, businessperson, and had spent her life selling furs among the orc tribes. Fang Hao studied her attributes, noting her elementary business mastery and her 5% profit bonus. "I bought a shop in Pearl City," Fang Hao told her, his tone commanding yet expectant. "When the time comes, you will be the one in charge." Finding a shop manager in a city of the undead was a delicate task. Most of the maids were illiterate, capable of counting small change but lost in the complexities of high-level commerce. Fortunately, the white fox possessed the merchant attribute. When Fang Hao told her she would be running a restaurant, her face went pale. "Master, my cooking is average," she whispered, her voice trembling. Fang Hao quickly reassured her she was there for the management and the books, not the broth. Relieved, she hurried off to begin her duties. Outside the manor, Du Jin, the skeleton merchant, approached with a formal bow. He presented an urgent order from the Merchant Alliance. The dwarves required 50,000 units of black powder. In exchange, 5,000 war coins and a rare white steel fire gun. Fang Hao marveled at the scale of the request. Were the dwarves blasting a mountain or preparing for war? At the warehouse, he opened his crafting book and summoned the materials. With a sudden flash of light, 50 wooden barrels of explosive powder appeared. "Tell the dwarves we want blueprints for future trades," Fang Hao instructed, watching as Du Jin vanished with the heavy cargo. But the day's work was not yet done. Fang Hao summoned Blood Hunter, the winged commander, to scout a distant mountain range for a rumored tomb. Fang Hao initiated divine descent, his consciousness sliding into the cold, rattling frame of a skeleton warrior. They mounted a massive bone dragon, its wings beating against the air with a rhythmic asterisk thrum asterisk. They soared high above the clouds, moving much faster than any giant lizard or dire wolf could ever dream. They reached the 3 peaks just as dusk began to bleed across the sky. They circled the ridges, searching for a hidden entrance, but found nothing but jagged stone and silence. "Lord," Blood Hunter rumbled as they turned back, "a tomb of this magnitude would be built inside the mountain, hidden from the eyes of the world." Fang Hao smiled to himself. He had a plan for that. Returning to his own body, Fang Hao found a prize waiting on the hall table, the white steel fire gun. Its wood-colored handle was intricately carved with vines. He marveled at its power, level 4 damage. It was now the deadliest weapon in his entire territory. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Year called them to the table. The 3 of them sat together, sharing a quiet dinner after a long day of discovery. Night fell over the territory and a light breeze stirred the air, the nightstones emitting a soft, ghostly halo. Fang Hao stepped out of the manor, his eyes fixed on a special building, the Iron Claw Rat Nest. He needed diggers for the mountain tomb, and he finally had 5 Lingwu crystals to spend. He selected the recruitment option, and then the hundredfold amplification triggered. Suddenly, 505 brown, fluffy rats materialized in the gloom. They were the size of pangolins, with pointed snouts and wicked, sharp foreclaws, but before Fang Hao could even check their attributes, a frantic asterisk rustle 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 filled the air. One rat was already shredding the newly laid stone slabs, digging downward with terrifying speed. Then another joined, and another. "Stop, don't dig up the ground," Fang Hao cried out in alarm. The rats froze instantly, staring up at him with huge, innocent eyes. Year wandered over, scooping one up and rubbing it against her cheek. "Master, they're so cute," she chirped. "They're going to dismantle my manor," Fang Hao groaned. He quickly summoned the undead hero, Blood Hunter. "Take these little ancestors to the mountain ridge," he commanded. "Let them dig into that mountain to see if there really is a tomb inside, before they hollow out the entire territory." They packed the rats into wooden barrels, 5 to a crate, and loaded them onto skeleton ogres riding bone dragons. As the skeletal beasts took flight into the night, Fang Hao finally breathed a sigh of relief. The manor was saved. The next morning, Fang Hao was back to his unchanging routine, grumbling through his push-ups. He muttered to himself about the unfairness of potions, wondering why he could drink a magic inspiration potion, but was forbidden from using a physical enhancement potion. His grumbling was interrupted as he passed the tailor's shop. Soy the tailor stepped out, clutching a design draft. "Lord," Soy began, sounding deeply concerned. "These stockings you designed, they are useless. They offer no defense, no warmth. It seems like an immature design." Fang Hao wiped the sweat from his brow and smiled. "Soy, don't think about defense, think about beauty and charm. A king's crown doesn't stop a headache or a sword, but it defines his power. These will do the same for the nobles." Fang Hao and Soy sat together on a weathered bench, locked in a long debate over the territory's supply of holy snow silk. Soy frowned, viewing the creation of luxury stockings as a waste of precious resources, but Fang Hao remained firm. He reminded her that more silk could always be purchased from the merchant Tavik, and eventually they struck a deal. They would produce 2 sets as a trial run for the aristocratic market. Back at the Lord's manor, the shadow of a bone dragon swept across the courtyard. Blood Hunter descended from the sky with a report. The 505 Iron Claw rats had successfully located a hidden tomb passage in the southwest mountains. Eager for the find, Fang Hao entered the divine descent state and mobilized his army. He left Njia behind to guard the territory, ignoring her playful guarantees that she wouldn't just sleep the day away, and set out with Blood Hunter. After a 4-hour march through rugged terrain, they reached a jagged peak where skeleton ogres stood watch. At the mountainside, they discovered a dark, sloping hole, a meter in diameter. Fang Hao shouted into the void, listening as the echoes bounced back from a vast, empty space deep below. "Night stones, rope ladder," he commanded. They descended into a chamber the size of a football field. The walls were covered in ancient murals depicting a religious army exterminating bat-winged creatures. Bypassing a massive, rusted bronze door, the team crept into a narrow stone corridor. The air grew heavy, oppressive, until they emerged into a massive hall lined with stone bunk beds reaching toward the ceiling. Thousands of corpses lay wrapped in rotting shrouds. When a scouting skeleton moved forward, the silence was shattered by a rhythmic clack, clack, clack. Tier 4 whites sat up in unison, tearing at their burial cloths. They lunged from the heights, some even snapping their own leg bones upon landing, yet they crawled forward with murderous intent. "Kill," Fang Hao ordered. His well-equipped Tier 2 skeletons held the line with kite shields and steel, while Blood Hunter became a whirlwind of crimson light. As the last white crumbled into dust, a final figure stirred. On a central bed lay a dried corpse clad in shimmering golden armor, its hollow sockets ignited with ghostly blue flames as it gripped a massive 2-handed greatsword. This was a Tier 10 Barrow commander. The ancient warrior rose, hissing a raspy curse at the intruders. Fang Hao, ever the optimist, raised a hand and offered a nervous smile. "How about we sit down and chat?" he suggested. "Let's resolve this peacefully." A heavy iron sword scraped across the stone floor, letting out a piercing screech that echoed through the dim tomb passage. Fang Hao watched the stone tomb commander approach, a shriveled, undead hero who refused to negotiate. With a sigh, Fang Hao gave the cold command, "Kill him." Bowstrings vibrated as a volley of arrows whistled through the air. The commander didn't even flinch. The shafts buried themselves in his shriveled flesh like needles into cured meat. Not a single drop of blood fell. As he drew closer, the skeleton warriors surged forward, their black iron kite shields raised. But with one dark, red glowing sweep of his heavy blade, the commander shattered the shields and cut the skeletons in half. "So fierce," Fang Hao muttered. "Blood Hunter, take him down." The Blood Hunter launched himself toward the ceiling, wings unfurled, before diving like a predator. The commander roared a hoarse, hateful sound, "Liars, you damned bats." The two heroes clashed in a blur of steel. The Blood Hunter glided through the air as if suspended by wires, carving deep, bone-exposing gashes into the commander's body. Finally, a skeleton warrior triggered a stun with a well-timed shield bash. In that moment of paralysis, the Blood Hunter's longsword flashed, severing the commander's head. The body didn't just fall, it shattered into sand. "Search the area," Fang Hao ordered. The skeletons moved quickly, even stripping the burial shrouds off the unawakened draugrs. They gathered 142 traces of death, 75 shadow stones, and a silver treasure chest. Fang Hao opened it to find a heroic strike skill scroll, a blueprint for a white steel two-handed greatsword, 12 bloodstones, 44 war coins, and a medal of courage. Fang Hao looked at the medal and frowned, the undead praising courage that's out of place. He pocketed the loot and approached the end of the hall where a giant bronze gate stood barred. He inserted the commander's key, turned it with a heavy asterisk click asterisk, and the skeletons pushed the doors open. Behind the gate lay a massive chamber lined with more stone beds, but at the far end stood 4 upright, mottled bronze coffins. Fang Hao knew what waited inside. He wasn't going to risk a cave-in with gunpowder, not yet. "All archers, enter steady aim state," he commanded. Then he nudged a lone skeleton warrior forward. "Go, take a lap inside." Inside the ancient tomb, the whites leaped from their stone beds like dumplings dropped into a boiling pot. Fang Hao's voice rang out through the shadows. Fire, arrows poured into the room like raindrops, striking the charging monsters. The skeleton spearmen moved forward, raising their kite shields to form an iron wall, while spears pierced through shriveled, bloodless flesh. For 1 long hour, the undead clashed in a terrifying display of mindless violence. When the last white finally fell, Fang Hao looked toward the end of the chamber. 4 copper coffins remained, silent and ominous. Fearing a hero-tier ambush, he turned to his commander. "Blood Hunter, take the men and retreat. I am going back to bring reinforcements." Fang Hao deactivated his divine descent state, waking instantly in his manor bedroom. After a quick sip of fruit wine, he stepped into the hall where Yer and the maids were busy with their culinary training. He found Njia in the backyard, her athletic physique glistening with sweat as she struck a sandbag. "I have run into trouble," he told her. "I need you to come with me." Without a word, she wiped her brow and prepared for battle. Re-entering his divine descent, Fang Hao gathered Njia and the skeletal warrior, Fireblade. Together, they returned to the depths of the mountain ridge ancient tomb. The air was thick with anticipation as they approached the 4 copper coffins. Suddenly, a heavy thumping echoed from within the metal. Bang! The lids burst open, revealing the hideous dusk revelers, Tier 10 vampires with crimson eyes and jagged fangs. They were powerful, but Fang Hao was prepared. "Fire!" he commanded. A massive volley of arrows whistled through the air, knocking the vampires back into their coffins. Every time the creatures tried to rise, asterisk swish asterisk, another wave of arrows buried them under a mountain of wood and iron. Finally, as the archers ran low on ammunition, Fang Hao turned to his 3 heroes. "Take it easy on them," he instructed, his voice cold and calculati. "NG, I need those corpses intact." With a sudden, blurred movement, Njia, Fireblade, and Blood Hunter charged forward to end the struggle. The battle reached a swift, brutal conclusion as the 3 heroes joined the fray. The Blood Hunter's bat wings unfurled, charging forward to impale the enemy before they could even rise from the carpet of arrows. Fireblade's flaming edge and Njia's tiger finger followed close behind, striking down the remaining vampires with ease. To Fang Hao's surprise, the victory was effortless. Not a single casualty was suffered. As the skeletons gathered 102 traces of death, 3 bloodstones, and 85 shadow stones, Fang Hao discovered a golden treasure chest. Inside lay blueprints for a fortress, a vital military facility for guarding strategic passes, along with designs for a copper corpse-nurturing coffin and a blue-tier noble cane sword. With the spoils secured, the party moved to the final copper door. As the key turned and the heavy metal creaked open, the nightstones began to dim. They stepped into a vast, silent chamber. High above, a circular copper mirror adorned with 4 shimmering sun essences tilted downward. It caught a stray beam of light, reflecting it directly onto a stone platform where a shriveled, grayish-white heart lay exposed. Fang Hao scanned the walls, noting the strange murals of human life and a radiant sun, imagery that seemed entirely out of place for a vampire's tomb. Suspicious, he ordered a skeleton warrior to circle the room. It tapped the walls and moved burial goods, but the silence remained unbroken. No traps, no guardians. "Don't touch that heart," Fang Hao commanded, his voice echoing in the gloom. "Move the other treasures out." The skeletons began their work, but greed, or perhaps simple programming, took over. High above, one skeleton climbed onto another's shoulders, reaching for the sun essences embedded in the mirror. Crack! The sound of snapping stone shattered the silence. Fang Hao's eyes darted to the platform. Thumpy! The shriveled heart gave a weak, sickening beat. Fang Hao's own pulse thundered in his chest. "Quick, get out and Njia, retreat," he bellowed. As they scrambled for the exit, the bodies of the 4 fallen vampires outside began to tremble violently. Thick, syrup-like blood erupted from their wounds, defying gravity as it flowed toward the secret chamber, hungrily seeking the center of the room. By the time Fang Hao noticed the anomaly, the 4 corpses had already shriveled and crumbled into fine sand. All their blood had been devoured by the heart on the stone platform, turning the pale organ increasingly ruddy, plump, and full of life. Thumpy, thump thumpy. The heart began to beat violently like a young muscle brimming with power, and Jia poked her head into the room, her voice hushed with fear. That is a bit scary. Fang Hao tried to comfort her, but his own voice trembled. It is fine. Deciding to investigate, Fang Hao entered the room alone. In his divine descent state, he was safe from permanent death, and more importantly, he could see the item's hidden information. As he approached, the system revealed the truth. The revived heart, consuming its blood, could transform a mortal into a vampire. Even more shocking was the mission it triggered, beating heart. The reward, a chance to recruit a dark gold grade hero. Fang Hao suppressed a cry of surprise. Dark gold grade, that was a power beyond his wildest dreams. He realized he would need to find the rest of the body to complete the set, a task as strange as his previous mission to collect 12 swords of atonement. After ordering his skeletons to seal the heart in a ceramic jar, the group began their long journey home as the sun dipped below the horizon. Meanwhile, outside Pearl City, the rapid clatter of horse hooves rang out against the cobblestones. A mercenary named Lyle slipped through the gates just before they closed, heading straight for a dimly lit room in the local tavern. Inside, 5 burly mercenaries and an old man named Mr. Eve waited in the shadows. Lyle panted, grabbing a cup of water. I found them, he rasped. A massive group of undead, at least tens of thousands. They were transporting burial goods toward the north. Mr. Eve's face twisted in confusion as he clutched a key hanging from his neck. The key to the tomb is in my hand, he whispered. How did they get in? The mercenaries grew restless, demanding the truth. They had been promised wealth and immortality, yet they were now facing an army of the dead. Sensing their mutiny, Mr. Eve pulled an old, hemp-bound notebook from his coat. I will tell you, the old man hissed, his voice thin and desperate. The secret lies within the Evernight monarch. If we find her and drink her blood, we will live forever. In the flickering candlelight, the mercenaries stood in a heavy, solemn sea. Lents, they were men who had bartered their souls for coin, yet the mention of the eternal night, the blood tribe, sent a chill through the room. Old Eve, a merchant of immense wealth and even deeper secrets, leaned forward, his eyes fixed on a crumbling notebook. The bearded mercenary reached out, his fingers trembling as he untied the fragile hemp rope. The pages whispered of a commander's past, of youthful loves, and a woman so beautiful she made the city's men mad with desire. But the narrative curdled. The commander had reached 40 years of age, dreaming of glory, until a New Year's celebration turned into a nightmare. After the city lord gifted the soldiers wine, the pages went blank, followed by a frantic, jagged scrawl. That damned old fossil deceived us, the notebook hissed from the past. My soldier's skin is peeling away, revealing the raw flesh beneath. He has turned us into monsters. Old Eve's voice was a low rasp as he revealed the truth. This wasn't just a story, it was his great-grandfather's legacy. The merchant ancestor had watched the city lord grow unnaturally young while the streets emptied of the living. A hand-drawn map to the sovereign's tomb remained as the only clue. We go to the ancient tomb tomorrow, Eve declared, his tone final. The mercenaries exchanged uneasy glances before retreating into the shadows of the hallway. Meanwhile, miles away, Fang Hao's eyes snapped open as he deactivated his divine descent state. He shook off the spectral haze and immediately messaged his subordinate, Zhang Bin. Zhang Bin, listen closely, Fang Hao commanded. I am sending 505 Iron Claw rats to the village. They will loosen the soil for the farmers, but keep a sharp eye on them. Those little beasts love to dig. Hunger gnawed at his stomach as he descended the stairs of the Lord's manor. The maid Year greeted him with a sweet, lingering smile, promising that dinner was nearly ready. But as Fang Hao stepped out into the night air, he found Scholar Nielsen waiting by a stone bench. Beside him loomed a terrifying figure, an orc skeleton known as Blackthorn. Once the commander of an army of 300,000, the Tier 5 hero now knelt in the dirt, his hollow ribs rattling. Blackthorn greets the Lord, the undead executioner rasped. Fang Hao studied the new hero's grim attributes, skills built for torture and speaking with the dead. A cold realization settled over him. Had he lost the battle, this creature would have been his end. Stand up, Fang Hao murmured, his voice echoing in the courtyard. I will find work for you soon. The battle was over, and the spoils of war began to flow into the territory. Cart after cart of gold and silver vessels rolled toward the warehouse, while Njia handed over a backpack stuffed with new blueprints. Fang Hao cataloged them all, from scrolls for heroic sure-kill skills to blueprints for fortress construction and white steel two-handed swords. Among the rare materials were 244 traces of death and a single wriggling spine. But one prize remained a mystery. Fang Hao pulled Scholar Nielsen aside, gesturing to a pottery jar held by a nearby skeleton. Inside, a dark gold-grade hero's heart beat with terrifying power. "Scholar," Fang Hao began, "should we seal this into an organ jar, or is there a better use?" Nielsen peered into the jar, his expression darkening. "My lord, I strongly advise against it. This heart contains the purest power of the blood race. It belongs to someone close to the ancestor himself. Sealing it would be like creating a time bomb. If discovered, the retaliation would be absolute." Fang Hao frowned, considering the weight of the scholar's words. He chose the path of caution and perhaps a future alliance. "Keep it safe, Nielsen. We will find a way to revive it instead." As night fell, Year announced dinner. Afterward, Fang Hao focused on his domain, systematically upgrading the underground tomb, the burial ground, and the undead mage tower, all the way to level 6. The next morning, Fang Hao headed to the Merchant Alliance building to meet Du Jin, the skeleton merchant. The dwarves had sent 2 massive new orders, 5,000 units of black powder and 2,000 white steel fire guns. "We lack the blueprint for the fire guns," Fang Hao noted, his brow furrowing. "My lord," Du Jin reminded him, "you have 1 unfilled order form left. Use it to search for the blueprint before it expires." With a stroke of a pen, the request was sent. Finally, the roar of massive wings echoed from above. 2 bone dragons descended from the sky, carrying 12 Tier 4 greatsword infantrymen. The men looked pale, shaken by their flight as they saluted their lord. "Rest for a moment," Fang Hao commanded, looking toward the horizon. "Once the carriages are ready, we set off for Pearl City." Standing amidst his greatsword infantrymen, Fang Hao unfolded the Lord's Book to the crafting tab. With a focused thought, he activated the blueprint for the merchant caravan carriage. Suddenly, the air shimmered. Thanks to the hundredfold amplification, 101 sturdy, leather-canopied carriages materialized out of thin air, filling the clearing. "Move the wine and tableware," Fang Hao commanded. We set off at once. The infantrymen sprang into action, loading the goods with disciplined efficiency. 3 hours later, the massive convoy rolled into Pearl City, drawing the curious whispers of the local crowds. Sitting atop a lead carriage, Fang Hao turned to the fox girl Xiao Bai, who sat nearby clutching her large, fluffy tail. "Xiao Bai, you are in charge here," he said softly. Along with 10 rabbit maids and a detachment of Tier 4 infantry for security, she would manage his new business. Clenching her fist, she promised, "I won't let you down, master." After securing the property deed from the Lord's manor, Fang Hao watched as his team began scrubbing away years of dust. As he stood outside, the proprietress of the tavern across the street approached, her hips swaying as she sized him up. "Just serving food?" she asked skeptically, warning him that without an inn, he might struggle to find customers. Fang Hao simply smiled. "I'll try it first. If it fails, I'll sell daily necessities." He followed her into the dim warmth of her tavern. Sitting at the counter, his gaze drifted to the bounty board, and his blood ran cold. A new bounty offered 5,000 gold coins to locate an undead gathering place to the north. That was his territory. "Mercenaries," the proprietress muttered, pouring him a beer. "They claimed it was an ancient tomb. Now they say it's the undead." Trying to mask his unease, Fang Hao handed over 5 gold coins. "I'd like to post a bounty of my own, 100 gold for any information regarding the Sword of Atonement." Suddenly, the tavern door slammed open. 6 elite mercenaries, all tier 6 or 7, marched in surrounding a wealthy-looking old man. They moved with a lethal grace that made Fang Hao's expression darken. As they disappeared upstairs, Fang Hao realized the danger. These men knew too much, and they could not be allowed to stay. He stood, set down his glass, and walked out into the sunlight with a grim new purpose. The afternoon sun beat down at its peak as Fang Hao and Njia returned to the territory, leaving the shop in the care of Little White. As they dismounted, Du Jin approached with news of the morning's acquisitions. He handed over 2 blueprints, the white steel plate and the white steel fire gun, noting that the war coins had already been delivered to Miss Year. Fang Hao studied the documents. The fire gun was a Tier 4 weapon, a massive leap in power for his skeleton archers. However, production required white steel ingots, a resource they couldn't yet refine. Du Jin promised to scour the Merchant Alliance for a furnace blueprint, leaving Fang Hao to ponder the possibilities as he returned to the Lord's manor. Inside his bedroom, Fang Hao checked a communicating conch shell left by the Minotaur, Copper Bull. A deep, distorted voice echoed through the shell. "Lord, we have captured 2 Skullcrusher spies. They are being sent to the fortress city." Wasting no time, Fang Hao summoned Njia and a new skeleton hero named Blackthorn. They boarded the Bone Dragon, soaring through the sky for 30 minutes until the temporary fortress loomed below. There, amid ranks of silent undead, Fireblade and Copper Bull waited. Copper Bull led them to a corner where 2 mangled orc corpses lay exposed to the sun. "They are dead, Lord," Copper Bull muttered nervously. "They fought back during the capture." He presented a crude map found on the bodies, a detailed layout of Fang Hao's checkpoints and defenses. Fang Hao's gaze turned cold. He looked to the armored skeleton behind him. "Blackthorn, interrogate them." The Minotaurs watched in horror as Blackthorn began drawing eerie, glowing runes around the corpses. "I need the blood of 2 magical beasts," the skeleton hero rasped. Copper Bull quickly ordered 2 unicorn sheep to be brought forward. Their blood flowed into the runes, merging with the dead flesh. Suddenly, the corpse sat upright, its eyes vacant and milky. "You are already dead," Blackthorn hissed. "Answer us, what is the Skullcrusher tribe planning?" The orc's voice was stiff, hollow. "The great chieftain, he has contacted the ogre tribe. They plan to join together too." Bang! The corpse violently exploded, showering the area in gore. Fang Hao wiped a drop of blood from his face, his expression grim. "Bring 2 more sheep," he commanded. "We aren't finished yet." The first corpse had offered little, but the second held the keys to survival. Skullcrusher had not surrendered. Instead, he had turned to the ogre tribes. Fang Hao felt the familiar tighten of tension in his chest. The peace he craved was slipping away. Before the second corpse, a unicorn sheep and a dying boar were bled. The runes glowed, and the dead orc sat upright, his eyes dazed and hollow. Blackthorn's voice was a cold blade. "Which tribe did Skullcrusher contact?" "The Bloodthroat tribe," the corpse rasped. "Across the mountains, led by an orange hero, Raukshuankaius." As the questions grew faster, the orc's body swelled like a grotesque balloon until *bang*. A muffled explosion showered the ground in a rain of meat. Blackthorn bowed. "My lord, the questioning is finished." Inside the hall, the air was thick with strategy. Fang Hao sat upon the main seat, his heroes gathered below. He looked to Copper Bull. "Telok, what do we know of these ogres?" "They are ancient and dangerous," the bullman replied, pointing to the map. "They dwell in the Bloody Mountains, the same jagged peaks as the Burial Dragon Cave. If they strike from there, they will be at our very doorstep." Fang Hao turned to his other commander. "Fireblade, focus on the patrols. We cannot let their scouts slip through." He knew he needed more than rumors. Fang Hao led Year to the Faceless One's hut, a silent, eerie intelligence agency. They filled out 2 forms requesting every detail on the Bloodthroat battle plans. The mailbox clattered. A metal tag appeared, *500 war coins*. A steep price for survival, but one Fang Hao paid without hesitation. "Year," he whispered, "have a maid watch this place. I want that news the moment it arrives." Night fell over the land. High above Pearl City, a bone dragon glided through the clouds, veiled by Bloodhunter's dark deception. Fang Hao extended a withered finger toward a tavern window on the 2nd floor. With a silent nod, Bloodhunter leaped, his massive bat wings snapping open as he dove into the darkness. A scream echoed from the room. The hunt had begun. Lights at the tavern had already been extinguished, but Fang Hao was in no mood for patience. With the threat of the Bloodthroat tribe looming to the north, he could not allow a hidden danger to remain in the south. These people had chosen the wrong time to provoke him. The sounds of fighting lasted only 5 minutes before the Bloodhunter leaped from a window, clutching an old man in his grasp. Massive bat wings snapped open, and the hunter landed firmly upon the back of the bone dragon hovering in the air. Back at the Lord's Hall, Fang Hao sat upright on his bone throne. Below him, the old man, Eve, trembled in his pajamas. He recognized Fang Hao from the tavern that morning. "The bounty you posted has caused me quite a bit of trouble," Fang Hao remarked coldly. "Tell me, how do you know of the ancient tomb?" Eve looked around at the skeletal undead and the beast-eared hero, and Gia. He wasn't just afraid, he was exhilarated. "My lord," Eve confessed, "my great-grandfather left a diary and a key. I seek the tomb to escape death. The bounty was merely a misunderstanding by my mercenaries." Nielsen the Lick leaned in and whispered into Fang Hao's ear, "His life force is exhausted. He wants to become immortal." Fang Hao understood. The old man was desperate to outrun the grave. Eve offered everything, his wealth, his manor, even his slaves, just to serve the undead. Fang Hao took the diary from the old man's shaking hands and signaled his guards. "Take him to the transformation pool," he ordered. "If he wishes to serve, let him become one of us." Later that night, under the glow of a nightstone lamp, Fang Hao read the diary. It told the chilling tale of a city lord named Chester, a man so afraid of dying that he turned his entire population into vampires just to hide his own transformation. "Incredible," Fang Hao whispered to the quiet room. The next morning, the bone dragon descended upon the pigman village, causing a brief commotion. Fang Hao and Njia stepped down from the dragon's back to meet the village chief, Petty. "My lord," Petty greeted them, "I did not expect a visit in person." Fang Hao got straight to the point. "How many orc villages lie between here and the Bloody Mountains?" 10 or more, Petty explained, "but they are scattered and constantly at war." Fang Hao nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Find a way to gather their chiefs," he commanded. "We are all neighbors, and it is time we got to know each other." Fang Hao stood before Petty in the pigman village, his expression uncharacteristically stern. "Gather the neighboring clan chiefs by tomorrow," he insisted, emphasizing the urgency of the matter. Petty hesitated, sensing the weight of his request. "Lord, may I ask why?" Fang Hao leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, cautious whisper. "The Bloodthroat tribe, an ogre clan to the north, is preparing to strike. To ensure our safety, I must eliminate every threat before they reach our gates." Panic flickered in Petty's eyes, but she nodded. Quickly devising a clever ruse involving fabricated mining rights to lure the chiefs into a meeting. With the trap set for noon the following day, Fang Hao turned his attention to the village center. He opened his ledger and initiated the construction of the Tower of the Dead. A brilliant, violet light erupted as a massive spire materialized, a mystical conduit that would allow him to project his consciousness across vast distances without ever leaving his home territory. Leaving the village behind, Fang Hao and Njia traveled to Pearl City, where a heavy, suffocating tension hung in the air. The streets were thick with patrols, and the local tavern had been cordoned off. Outside his shop, his maid, Xiaobai, greeted them with wide, anxious eyes. "Master, the guards have been everywhere. They say several people were murdered across the street last night." Fang Hao remained composed, hiding the truth of his own involvement behind a mask of calm curiosity. His composure was soon tested when a squad of guards intercepted them, summoning Fang Hao to the city lord's mansion immediately. Inside the council chamber, City Lord Cyril sat like a hawk, his eyes searching Fang Hao's face for any sign of guilt. "A tragedy occurred last night," Cyril began, his voice trailing off as he watched for a reaction. "I must ask, how many soldiers did you leave in the city?" Fang Hao didn't blink. "Only 12 Tier 4 infantrymen, Lord Cyril. I am a simple businessman. I have no interest in such violence." The lie landed perfectly. Cyril sighed, dismissing the deaths as a mere mercenary vendetta. Relieved that the investigation had stalled, Fang Hao leaned forward, shifting the conversation toward his next objective. "I understand. Now, tell me, City Lord, do you happen to have any white steel ingots in stock?" "You need white steel ingots?" Cyril's voice hummed with surprise. He hadn't expected someone of Fang Hao's status to be short on basic materials. Fang Hao nodded firmly. He needed those ingots, or better yet, a blueprint to begin mass-producing his new white steel fire guns before the next battle erupted. Cyril stroked his long beard, falling into a heavy silence. Fang Hao watched him closely, sensing the old man was weighing a secret. Finally, the city lord spoke, his voice strained with feigned difficulty. "The city has a reserve, but it's already entered the armory. I cannot simply sell it to you." He paused, his eyes sharpening into thin slits. "However, I can issue a bounty. If you capture the murderers who slaughtered those mercenaries in the tavern last night, the reward will be 1,500 units of white steel." Fang Hao suppressed a smile. He knew exactly who the murderer was himself, but Cyril didn't care about the truth. He wanted a scapegoat. The city lord handed over a map, pointing toward a manor outside the city. "The Fire Wolf mercenary group," Cyril hissed. "Bring me their leaders for a public execution, and the steel is yours." Leaving the mansion, Fang Hao arrived at his new shop. A fresh sign hung above the door, bearing the name *Lao de Shuang* in bold human script. As he admired his handiwork, the tavern proprietress approached, her face a mask of irritation. She pressed 5 gold coins into his hand, a refund for his now-cancelled bounties. "Those wretched mercenaries," she cursed, her sudden profanity startling him. "The tavern is sealed until the killer is caught." Fang Hao leaned in, whispering, "What do you know of the Fire Wolf Group?" The proprietress glanced around nervously. She revealed that years ago, those mercenaries had maimed the city lord's only son, leaving the boy a shut-in who hadn't been seen in years. Cyril wasn't looking for a murderer, he was finally settling a blood feud. Returning to his territory, Fang Hao wasted no time. He gathered his strike team, the energetic Njia and the grim blood hunter. He summoned 100 bone dragons and a full complement of Tier 5 skeleton ogres to the courtyard. Blackthorn was ordered to stay behind to guard the walls. With a surge of power, Fang Hao used divine descent to possess a bone dragon. He patted the creature's cold, ivory neck, and with a powerful leap, they soared into the clouds, racing toward the Fire Wolf Manor as the horizon began to glow with the setting sun. High above the world, the bone dragon sliced through the clouds, the wind whistling past its skeletal ears. From this height, the city below looked like a mere matchbox, and the people, nothing more than scurrying ants. As they descended toward the Fire Wolf mercenary group's manor, Fang Hao's eyes narrowed. Something was wrong. This was no simple manor. It was a level 3 city, complete with a lord's manor, barracks, and reinforced stone walls. He realized with a heavy heart that this place had likely belonged to a fellow transmigrator, one who had met a grim end at the hands of the mercenaries. "Prepare dragon breath," Fang Hao commanded. "Let's end this quickly." 100 bone dragons folded their wings and plunged from the clouds. They swept over the city like a nightmare, unleashing pillars of black energy that hissed across the ground. The battle was over before it truly began. Massive skeleton ogres leaped from the dragons' backs to secure the perimeter. "Don't kill the rest," Fang Hao shouted. "Tie them up." Only 6 mercenaries remained, including their leader, a powerful Tier 6 warrior. He knelt in the dirt, trembling as he pleaded for his life. Fang Hao asked about the city's original owner, but the leader's shifty eyes told the story. The original lord was gone, and there was nothing more to be said. Inside the manor, the air smelled of old gold and silk. Njia rummaged through the spoils until she let out a sharp cry of surprise. In her hand was a silver-white blade. It was a sword of atonement, a Tier 3 weapon of purple quality, identical to the cursed blade Fang Hao had purchased days before. In a room on the second floor, they discovered a silver treasure chest. Fang Hao broke the seal, finding a blueprint for white steel scale armor and 2 heroes' hearts. It was a massive haul. As dusk settled over the land, the dragons took to the skies once more, laden with riches. They arrived at Pearl City under the cover of twilight. City Lord Cyril looked down at the 6 corpses Fang Hao had delivered. "Why are they all dead?" Cyril asked indifferently. Fang Hao looked the city lord in the eye, hiding the truth of his undead army. "They began shouting lies about your reputation, my lord, claiming you had framed them. I had no choice but to silence them." Cyril nodded, satisfied. "Fine, guards, prepare the white steel ingots for our guests." In front of the armory, the massive giant lizard lay waiting, its scales glistening under Fang Hao's watchful eye. One by one, heavy blocks were loaded onto the beast's saddle. The final tally reached 1,510 units of white steel ingots, 10 more than the initial estimate. With a curt nod to the city guard, Fang Hao led the lizard toward the exit. As they wound through Pearl City's central district, the pace slowed. On the roadside gallows, the members of the Fire Wolf mercenary group hung high, a grim spectacle for the gathering crowd. An official shouted from a platform, spinning a tale of the city lord's nobility and mercenary vendettas. Njia leaned in, whispering her doubts about whether the people truly believed the lies. Fang Hao looked at the swaying bodies inside. "Most probably will," he replied, "in this world. The words of the powerful often outlive the truth of the dead." By the time the lizard reached the territory, the sun had dipped below the horizon. After the skeletons unloaded the steel, Fang Hao sought out the specter, Xiao Yu, at her residence. He presented her with the slow-gilt longsword, a trophy from his recent victory. The moment Xiao Yu touched the hilt, a blinding light erupted, filling the room. A system notification chimed in Fang Hao's mind. Xiao Yu had ascended to a green Tier 2 hero, now known as Calamity Song Hilda. Her form was no longer a transparent phantom. She stood before him nearly physical, startled by her own sudden, literal vulnerability. After a hurried change into a linen gown, she insisted on keeping the name Xiao Yu. To test her new shadow stealth skill, she dissolved into the darkness like ink, reappearing a heartbeat later behind Fang Hao to tap his shoulder. Her clothing had merged with her into the gloom. It was the perfect tool for an assassin, a shadow that could strike without warning. Finally, Fang Hao headed to the Merchant Alliance building. Du Jin, the skeleton merchant, bowed as he approached the counter. Fang Hao didn't hesitate. He signed the official order for 2,000 white steel fire guns. The deal would net him 200,000 war coins and precious influence with the dwarves. He secured the blueprint for fire gun bullets, and as the ink dried, the foundations of his growing military might were finally set in stone. The air shimmered as the hundredfold amplification triggered, resulting in a staggering 4,040 white steel fire guns. Fang Hao surveyed the massive, metallic heap before dispatching the skeleton merchant to deliver half the haul to the dwarves. With the remaining 2,040 guns, Fang Hao headed to the shooting range. 20 skeleton archers raised their weapons, their bony fingers steady against the triggers. Fire! A dense, deafening roar erupted, bang, bang, bang. The straw targets didn't just tear, they disintegrated, sending fragments flying as bullets punched through stone walls. The power was undeniable, yet as the skeletons began the grueling process of reloading, the mood shifted. Clatter, clatter, 5 minutes of stiff mechanical labor for a single instant of fire. Njia strolled over, her brow arched in skepticism. So slow, she remarked. By the time the battle is over, they might fire twice. Fang Hao rubbed his chin, contemplating the tactical flaw until Njia offered a blunt solution. Just make 100 guns for each person. Fire one, swap it. Fire another, swap it. Fang Hao grinned. Njia, you are a genius. While the territory buzzed with the crafting of white steel scale armor, a darker scene unfolded in the Coldwind Mountains. Inside the Skullcrusher tribe's hall, Chieftain Sar listened to a scout's trembling report. 100 bone dragons, a human leader, and the betrayal of Copper Bull. Sar slammed his fist against his armrest, the wood groaning under his fury. They go too far, he hissed. Fearing an imminent undead invasion, Sar made a desperate gamble. He ordered his tribe to march the following morning, intending to force the rival trolls to face the brunt of the bone dragons. To numb the stress of the coming war, he pulled a bashful orc woman into his arms, seeking a moment of primal distraction. The next morning, Fang Hao's day began with the domestic scent of year's breakfast. After a routine inspection of his shops, he entered the Merchant Alliance. Du Jin, the ever-loyal manager, greeted him warmly. Though no new orders had arrived, Fang Hao's eyes were on the future. He purchased 21 slave scrolls and a communicating conch shell, small pieces of a much larger puzzle, before returning to his manor to prepare for the day ahead. After a quick breakfast, Fang Hao arrived at the edge of the Bloody Mountains, accompanied by Blackthorn and 20 bone dragons carrying a small army of skeleton ogres. After scouting the narrow mountain pass from the air, the two commanders landed to survey the terrain. This was the only path the Bloodthroat tribe could take. Fang Hao opened the Lord's Book and selected the fortress blueprint. With a flash of light, a level 1 fortress erupted from the earth. He immediately funneled resources into the structure, upgrading it to level 6. The simple outpost transformed into a massive Western-style medieval castle with stone walls 5 meters wide and a heavy iron-reinforced gate. He quickly manifested level 6 arrow towers and magic towers along the battlements, preparing for the inevitable storm. Standing atop the wall, Blackthorn looked toward the northern peaks. "My lord," he advised solemnly, "the ogres are massive and strong. We must delay their approach to increase our attack time." He suggested a massive trench, though he worried the rocky ground would be impossible to dig in time. Fang Hao smiled. He had a different kind of labor in mind. First, he needed to secure the rear. Bloodhunter arrived on a bone dragon carrying barrels of black powder. They flew to the secret mountain tunnel and tossed the explosives inside. A massive roar shook the mountains and the tunnel collapsed into a wall of jagged rubble. The back door was officially closed. 2 hours later, Zhang Bin arrived, accompanied by a swarm of over 500 iron claw rats. Fang Hao stared in surprise. The rats looked adorable. To tell them apart, the villagers had dressed the creatures in tiny leather helmets, colorful collars, and even knitted clothes. "Start digging," Fang Hao commanded. The scene was spectacular. Dust and stones flew into the air as 500 rats tore into the hard rock with supernatural speed, carving a massive trap into the mountain floor. Just as the work hit its stride, 2 more bone dragons descended from the sky. Njia and Petty jumped down, followed by 9 trembling orc prisoners. Njia marched up to Fang Hao and slapped a stack of papers into his hand. "Here are the slave contracts," she said with a triumphant grin. 9 tribes in total, and we've already wiped out 4 of them.